Best vineyards of all of Westeros and elite archers. Saturn's Pav. Hightower's Castle, Alttown. The sky, it's so blue. The clouds, so white. I told myself for who knows what time by now, as I stared out of the window, losing myself in the immensity of everything here on the surface. And the clarity the sun brings to the world, is overwhelmingly beautiful. After spending the entire morning gazing outside through the windows of the first castle I visited in my life, I was finally brought back from my thoughts after hearing a familiar voice calling for me. Satin, is everything all right? The voice in question asked me, avoiding startling me with sudden physical contact, probably already knowing of my awful past. Standing behind the boy that spoke to me, I saw a cute-looking cat of black fur and a very tall knight with shining armor that resembled, from what I've just recently learned, a lion. Rogue told me that he and this knight, named Knight, were from the same homeland, as well as other two people I've yet to meet. It is, my prince. I finally replied with a quick bow, feeling once again the gentle fabric of my recently gifted fine clothes rubbing gently against my skin. Just delighting myself with this view while digesting the delicious meal I ate today. You do well to enjoy it. Most people are so desensitized by the gods, many blessings that they are no longer capable of truly appreciating the miracles of this world. The chosen Messiah of the gods said to me in a friendly manner and smiled, his cat staring at me as if it understood my words. And please, I've already told you, there's no need to act so formal while we are not socializing with other noble houses. But, I stuttered in embarrassment but eventually conceded to his point, albeit in a not so eloquent way. I'm sorry, my Pure Don. For some reason that caught me by surprise, although he indeed had already said such a thing, I wasn't capable of understanding why. And I couldn't explain it, but something in him was just so magical. And I wasn't talking about his eyes of different colors or well-kept mismatched hair. Or how he towered over me both physically and mentally despite our age gap. No, that simply wasn't it. The Crown Prince of the Seven Kingdoms suddenly sighed in amusement at my botched reply, probably getting tired of my clumsiness, but made no remarks. Despite his status, Prince Durandon wasn't the type to look down on people. And from what Rogue told me, he was mature enough to understand that a ruler required to know more about his subjects if he expected to rule them fairly, thus why I met him so far away from the capital. Don, I've already prepared all of your things for our leave. A girl, around my age, joined us and spoke to him with great elegance. And Lord Garyon has also finished unloading his goods for trade on the city's market and supplying the ship for our voyage to the arbor. As the Crown Prince acknowledged and thanked the girl's assistance, I briefly recalled everything I knew from this girl. She, just like me, was someone of low birth that the Crown Prince had accepted into his care. With the curious name of Pia, she seemed rather cold towards me at first, but with time it seemed I've earned enough of her confidence. From what we spoke, I got the impression that she would kiss the ground Prince Durandon stepped on if it wasn't for his disencouragement of such behavior. Frankly, the little I knew of this Pia girl was that it probably made her want to kiss it even more. But I didn't blame her, the prince was indeed an extraordinary individual. Don, I've already split your legionnaires, the best are already waiting for you while the others were sent ahead to Hornhill. Are you ready to go? Another giant of a knight casually asked. This one had his face hidden beneath a helm in the shape of a snarling hound. Yes, Clegane. The prince nodded before turning to me once again, prompting the cat I now recalled being named Shadow to climb up to his shoulder. Shall we? Yes, Don. I struggled a little, but eventually succeeded in treating him like a friend. Walking down the endless stairs of this impressive building and I took a final look at all the fine tapestry of this place, we boarded a small ship that immediately took us to the harbor. Coming to see us off, our generous hosts met the prince and his small retinue on their exclusive segment of the docks in Alttown, as rulers of the city. Before distracting myself by the body of water so big it disputed dominance with the sky, proven by how both salty waves and cold breeze instigated each other, I behaved myself while standing next to Prince Durandon. My prince, we are all honored for having you stay with us in this passing month. The man named Baylor told the prince in a polite tone, as he and the rest of us had all of our preparations ready to leave their city by ship. And once again I'm deeply sorry for my father's continuous absence. His current condition has already made me go through several sleepless nights. The other Hightower members always seemed uneasy every time Lord Layton's non-attendance was brought up. Even if some were less apologetic of their lord's terrible manners than others, none were willing to shame their house by openly admitting that, at least to their eyes, Lord Hightower had gone mad. Not in public anyways. They weren't that careful with their words whenever the Crown Prince wasn't around. I told myself while sighting the top of the Hightower even from here. I couldn't help myself from recalling what I heard while being mistaken by a servant of their household. Opportunities in disguise, as Rogue had taught me, given how nobles would say things around servants they wouldn't normally say to figures like the prince or his more notorious followers. The honor has been entirely mine, Esser. The hospitality of your house is truly worthy of praise. Prince Durandon reciprocated the man's previous politeness with a gentle smile, inferring that even with his royal army constantly sending enough supplies to cover the expenses demanded of a royal guest, it must have been quite tiresome to have us all around for an entire month. And you have nothing to worry about from me. In truth, I want you to know that I'm terribly sorry for your father's serious health condition and that all my prayers are with him. I appreciate that, my prince. And also, I must insist that having you with us has been no trouble at all. The maesters of the citadel sung many praises of your patronage of their prestigious work and services to the realm. Baylor Hightower replied with a genuine smile, subtly changing subjects away from his sire. Please, come visit us again whenever you feel like it. Until then, we all wish you and your men safe travels and Godspeed. As the crown prince finished saying goodbye to all of the Hightowers, taking much longer with the young lady named Linus who seemed to act a little too boldly before the royal prince and his Lannister companions, we all boarded the beautiful ship at our disposal and immediately set sail. During our voyage, I looked for opportunities to show my gratitude to everything Prince Durandon had provided to me, while also wondering when I would see Rogue again. Greetings, young man. I heard someone suddenly called me once I began helping the girl named Pia, surprisingly not mistaking me for a girl this time. Turning to face the owner of that voice, I noticed that it was a beautiful man of long silver hair and purple eyes, dressed in a distinctive attire consisting of a long wide piece of woolen white cloth worn over the shoulders with an opening for the head and purple garments. Behind him was a handsome man with short raven hair and blue eyes, dressed like a rich merchant with an expensive-looking lute strapped on his back. These two seemed like two halves of the crown prince, with eyes of each color of his and his mismatched hair of black and silver. Come to think of it, even Esser Knight seemed to pay homage to the young prince, with the theme of lion in his armor that the prince was going for with the Royal Legion's banner. My lords, I quickly bowed to them, having no clue of who they really were but knowing better than to risk insulting them. Hey, don't be silly, Satin. Pia chuckled at my expense before pulling me to stand. There's no need to bow, kid. The man with dark hair and blue eyes told me while the previous one nodded in agreement. Neither of us are lords or knights. Bard, monk, it's so good to see you too. Pia finally spoke, revealing to me who these individuals were and by their uncommon names I immediately deducted their relationship with Rogue. Are these guys magical, just like him? I wondered, recalling the way I saw the servant of the stranger disappearing in thin air, only to reappear behind a thug of the Undercity and slit his throat. Likewise, my dear, but I'm afraid Lord Tyrion didn't seem to share your enthusiasm, at least for my arrival anyway. Monk replied with an amicable smile and fake concern, hinting that the shrugging man standing beside him and the short Lannister were close friends. In any event, I hope that big brooding guy hasn't been that much of a trouble for you and the prince. No trouble at all, Pia said while smiling at the laugh the man named Bard gave. Actually, quite the contrary. His commitment to his knighthood duties knows no bounds, for he was the one to guard the prince's door during every night, leaving Esser Clegane well rested to cover for him during the day. Although his lack of words might sometimes be a little too intimidating, I've grown somewhat used to it. Ignoring all the headache forming with such terrible names, I eventually assumed they were talking about Esser Knight and finally asked. Are you two gentlemen friends with Esser Knight? And, R.O. Yes, we are, hence why we've approached you. Bard immediately replied, interrupting me mid-sentence. Pia, my dear, would you mind giving us some privacy? Not at all, I still have plenty to do before we reach our destination. Pia shook her head before rolling up her sleeves, not seeming curious even in the slightest. I will leave you three alone then. Once we were left alone in the ship's kitchen, with the occasional marine passing by to accomplish one of their tasks and duties, we began talking. So, what's your opinion on the Crown Prince? Bard suddenly asked, surprising me a little with his lack of subtlety, posing a stark contrast with the cryptic way that Rogue always spoke to me. He's special. I decided to be honest with my response, trusting their confidence in the privacy of the place we found ourselves in. Rogue told me he is supposed to be a chosen of both the new and old gods, but only after spending some time with him I understood why. I don't know how to explain it yet. As both men nodded, Monk remarked. That's reassuring, young man. But we would like to hear if your opinion ever changes about him. I must have perked my eyebrow too much for them to notice my confusion, because soon after that the man named Bard explained his companion's words. Nothing to worry about, kid. We just want to watch his progress, for much relies on him and everything could be lost if he isn't ready before the time arrives. Although the man's mysterious speech of fate was naturally even more worrisome to an orphan raised in the hell that was the Undercity like me, something in the way he spoke and carried himself calmed me down. Deciding to change subjects, I politely asked. If it's not a problem to ask, I would like to know where's Rogue. Both men shared an amused chuckle to what appeared to be an inside joke before Monk revealed to me something. He's on this ship with us, probably just hiding behind Knight's shadow. That clearly confused me since I never noticed him interacting with S or Knight. Why would a dangerous man like Rogue have to hide behind someone? Was S or Knight just as powerful? But before I could ask more questions, the two men nodded their heads and excused themselves, leaving me alone wondering what all of that meant. I suddenly sensed a strange smell. It wasn't terrible, quite the opposite, but despite not recalling sensing it before, it felt strangely familiar as it sent chills down my spine and ruffled my hair. Walking around the ship, I heard the Marines confused about smelling rain but noticing how clear the skies and calm the sea were. Durandon's POV. That smell of ozone once again, I mentally sighed, quickly hiding the scent my magic left behind, while satisfied with the progress I've made with my older half-brother. I guess there's no helping it is but a small price for more potent magic. As the ship belonging to my Royal Legion's Marine Force took us through the divide between the Honeywine River and Sunset Sea, with the weather being exactly what my thaumaturgy cantrip foretold me it would be, I took my time to check my progress while meditating with the sea waves and breeze leading us to our destination. From all the stats I've raised to the countless new perks I've unlocked, I had plenty to assimilate, hence the importance of this contemplation. Initially, since my points were abundant at 5 per new level reward, I had bought several just because I liked the way most of them sounded. Later I got humbled with the notion of how steep the cost to raise my stats were becoming, and wasn't willing to buy anything that wasn't completely essential to me. But since my titles have appeared and changed this matter, I was once again more than open for improvements. 94 points remaining. I've already acquired around 22 perks, which while some weren't that much impressive by themselves, created a solid foundation to the minimaxing build I was striving for. The quintessential ones being Prodigy and Sleep is for the dead, essentially doubling all the XP I earned and preventing me from wasting a fourth of my time sleeping, freeing it so I could continue to grind to exhaustion my skills and stats during every night while still keeping up with the necessary social interactions I had to fulfill during the day. Player's mind and body at first seemed to be nothing more than giving me full control of both my facial and body language as well as my ability to live this life as a game, which was already useful as hell in terms of practicality, but also gave me some sort of peace of mind to make rational decisions and better use my intelligence stat. They granted me, besides the perks of an unrealistic body, to keep a straight face while persuading as well as intimidating Tywin Lannister, while also not letting myself get frightened of the nightmarish hordes of undeads I've been dealing with, which from what I recalled seemed to be ruining the old Lion's Knights more than the looming rebellion of the wannabe Vikings. Added it to my mental map and inventory, and I was what any respectable gamer ought to be, as I was capable of sort of echolocating myself and my surroundings, like back in that dungeon filled with magical darkness, while also having the completely broken mini version of an endless pocket dimension, that made storing and equipping things a trivial matter. Metamagic genius put me on track to become one of the strongest spellcasters, right after I had discovered that I was a sorcerer of both draconic and divine heritage. With it I could simultaneously twin all of my spells, effectively cutting its cost in half, while also making it so subtle to the point that I could actually walk around with my arms crossed behind my back. Surprisingly, chemist and physician boosted my chances of understanding both necromancy and abjuration as more than just raising undeads and casting magical barriers, like understanding healing magic and brewing of elixirs. Meanwhile, linguistic gave me the necessary edge to decipher several recipes of magical infusions I got from the Alchemist Guild, which I was confident would be directly responsible for allowing Elise to give the final steps of turning my artificer title into a profitable professional for my Alchemist Guild, and make cryptic languages to safely communicate with my associates like Chataya, Maud and Haleen. Doubling down on my perception, I got observant, alert and sentinel. A really awesome combination, if I may say so. The first made me capable of easily noticing the inscriptions carved around each dungeon's entrances and immediately spot any hidden traps without having to linger around for long or risk missing anything. The second, paradoxically enough, made me less paranoid, since I didn't have to fear any sneak attack thanks to my own version of spider sense tingling every time something looked at me with bloodlust. While the third gave me considerable control of the battlefield, striking whenever my opponents dropped their guards and reliably knocking them prone for a brief moment for me to exploit. Another great combo was diplomat, empathic and actor. Mostly for the sake of cheating with social encounters since there was no official charisma stat, with both the prospect of being a master in persuasion and deception in the white canvas that I was thanks to players' mind, and also having great insight on what others desired in order to use it for my own personal gains. Crossbow expert and sharpshooter made me the next coming of Bullseye, Green Arrow and Hawkeye with basically any ranged attack, but most importantly with the awesomeness that was the experience of using a crossbow as if it was simultaneously a shotgun, an automatic rifle and a sniper, depending on the occasion and need. Only problem was that it was so effective with my Dragonbone crossbow that even my offensive spells weren't worth the cost of my mana, which made it unnecessarily difficult to prioritize during my grinding. Proof of that was how long it took for me to unlock both dual wielder and superior technique in order to live the fantasy of fighting like Kirito and many other badass characters that defied common combat logic. By the time I got more titles to compensate for the cost of points, I had suffered enough with the expensive price of 3 points for each stat raise and the scarcity of perks that provided something like it. Now, onto new territory. While the less impressive were quickly ignored and forgotten, with lightly and moderately armored being dismissed since I was aiming to get heavily armored thanks to my ability to instantly equip it through my inventory, the few outstanding ones caught my attention. Perks. Less than available perks greater than. First, tutor cost 4 points. As someone who can impart knowledge onto others, given your knack to explain concepts in clearer ways, you gain the ability to do the following. After spending a short period of time with a student, you can teach them a specific skill or title you already possess. The time you need to spend teaching them depends on your intelligence and the intelligence of your student. The title you teach them is not the full version, but rather a downgraded version of it. For the complete version of the title, your student must still unlock it for themselves. My great treasure which I couldn't wait to put to use with my legionaries after the success I had with Tick, making him a respectable rogue monk, with features like martial arts and sneak attacks. Can you imagine an army of fighters barbarians? Capable of simultaneously action surging and raging whenever the fight got ugly. And that's without considering all the other possible combinations I had at my disposal. 4 points. Warcaster cost. 5 points. You have practiced casting spells in the midst of combat, showing wit to assess tactical situations and act quickly in battle, learning techniques that grant you the following benefits. You have great advantage on maintaining your concentration on a spell since it will reinforce whatever barriers you have protecting you, and some of your spells have their casting time reduced, from 6 seconds to instantly, aiding you to be the one to strike first. Concentration had yet to be a big deal with the spells I currently had in hands during combat, but I knew that rather sooner than later I would have to endure some beating since some spells would certainly require me to maintain focus in order to keep their magic active, and if I lose it, such a spell would end. Which was most likely to happen after taking damage or being surprised by an unexpected shift of the scenery, given that maintaining focus on a spell was like rationalizing a complex mathematical problem or reciting a very long and complicated poem without written help in keeping track of it. Even though I had alert to lend me a hand to avoid those situations, I'd prefer to avoid having to go through such an annoying situation at all costs. 5 points. And to my surprise, just like with how superior technique made me a battlemaster fighter, I got a trait out of it for my wizard title. Wizard trait unlocked. War magic. A variety of arcane colleges specialize in training wizards for war. The tradition of war magic blends principles of all schools put to practice on the battlefield. It teaches techniques that empower a caster's spells, while also providing methods for wizards to bolster their own defenses. Followers of this tradition are known as war mages. They see their magic as both a weapon and armor, a resource superior to any piece of steel. War mages act fast in battle, using their spells to seize tactical control of a situation. Their spells strike hard, while their defensive skills foil their opponents' attempts to counterattack. War mages are also adept at turning other spellcasters' magical energy against them. Feature unlocked. Arcane deflection. You have learned to instinctively weave your magic to fortify yourself against harm. Whenever you are targeted by an attack, while guarded by magical barriers, you can choose between reflecting back or absorbing a third of the damage. Feature unlocked. Spellcaster surge. You can store magical energy within yourself to later empower your damaging spells, effectively doubling its damage. You can store a maximum number of power surges equal to your wizard level. Whenever you finish a short rest, your number of power surges resets to 1. Whenever you successfully end a spell by either dispelling or countering it, you gain 1 power surge, as you steal magic from the spell you foiled. If you end a short rest with no power surges, you gain 1 power surge. Yup, I was already a wizard nerd with my Order of Scribes trait, why not a war veteran wizard? Besides, if the best defense is a good offense, so must be a good defense the best offense. Just need to find a way of dispelling or countering someone else's spells. But that's neither here nor there for now. Magic initiate cost. 6 points. First class spells no longer cost you mana, second class spells cost you 50% less and third class spells cost a third less of their usual cost to be casted. First class is cantrips, second ones for 10 points each and the, up to this point, unreachable third class for 20 points instead. No arguments needed. Excellent for continuing to grind their levels up and really practical to kinda have the worth of my mana points increased. Besides, that would certainly make things easier for Elise and anyone else of my party that I deemed worthy enough to trust the secrets of arcane knowledge. 6 points. Chef cost. 4 points. Time and effort spent mastering the culinary arts has paid off. You gain the following benefits. You gain proficiency with cook's utensils if you don't already have it. You can instantly cook special food, provided you have ingredients and cook's utensils on hand. Any creature who eats the food regenerates their health, stamina and mana faster for the next couple of hours. These special treats last 8 hours after being made, basically allowing me to more easily brew more healing potions without drawing too much attention, and that boost to regeneration of all my bars was nothing to scoff at. Having said that, I was really tempted to not take it since it seems to not be as good as the previous two, but remembering how useful physician and chemist were in mastering medicine and chemistry, I end up betting that I could learn something more about alchemy through it. 4 points. Keen mind cost. 5 points. You have a mind that can track time, direction and detail with uncanny precision. You gain the following benefits. You always know which way is north. You always know the number of hours left before the next sunrise or sunset. You can accurately recall anything you have seen or heard before. Another no-brainer since it could speed my learning curve for basically any skill, especially now that I've basically read an entire library worth of knowledge. Besides, adding this to observant, I could finally read a large book in seconds by merely flipping through the pages with my photographic memory. However, thinking about it for a moment left me really pissed for a hot minute, wondering how fast, if not outright useless, it would have made my efforts to list every book, scroll and even parchment stored on the Citadel. But I found solace in the notion that it was that same effort that allowed me to unlock this perk. 5 points. Mobile cost. 4 points. You are exceptionally speedy and agile. You gain the following benefits. Your base running speed is naturally doubled. When you dash or run on difficult terrain of any kind, it doesn't disturb you. When you attempt to make a melee attack against a creature, you don't expose yourself to opportunity attacks from that creature, whether you hit it or miss. I guess this is what I got from raising my mobility this high. Still, although running around cities while performing parkour doesn't seem to be a problem for me and I had my wild shape to compensate for moving around in the wilderness, I'm pretty confident this would be a perfect fit for my water dance style. Not to mention I could always use the boost of speed, so I could finally sprint through a full marathon. 4 points. Running LV 30, 45%. Allows you to move faster. You can traverse longer distances quicker for longer period of time. Costs -1 SP per minute. Max velocity. 40 km/h. Nice. That's much faster and considerably less tiresome than it must be to most athletic humans. Tough cost. 5 points. Your health bar maximum doubles immediately and increases twice as fast per level when you gain this perk. Increases your endurance stat by 2. My draconic resilience already doubled my stamina bar, so this really comes in handy. Plus the extra stat was always welcomed. 5 points. Dungeon Delver cost. 2 points. Alert to the hidden traps and secret doors found in many dungeons. You gain the following benefits. You become more nimble, gaining expertise with acrobatics of all kinds. You become stronger, gaining expertise with athletics of all kinds. Increases both your power and mobility stat by 1. Nice little boost. Am I walking towards the path of weightlifting mammoths and running non-stop for days while also becoming near immortal? Of course I am. Sign me in. 2 points. Skulker cost. 3 points. You are an expert at slinking through shadows. You gain the following benefits. You can easily hide when you are lightly obscured from the creature from which you are hiding. And knows how to blend in even during daytime. Plus, when you are hidden from a creature, making any ranged weapon attack or silent range spell doesn't immediately reveal your position. My stealth stat had finally provided me with a perk to go along with it that didn't solely rely on my perception of my surroundings. Not gonna lie, kinda weak, but it was still the least expensive I could get, and the prospect of being an untraceable stalker had its appeal to me. 3 points. Artificer Genius cost. 3 points. You've gained the ability to come up with inventive solutions for runesmithery and alchemy even under pressure. Your elixirs and infusions are much more potent and less toxic, costing less material as well as requiring less time to be crafted. I guess it's useful, since I've been really struggling to make even a single copy of each. Plus it helps with the idea of mass producing and stockpiling it. Also not that groundbreaking, but solid enough with that price. 3 points. 41 points spent. 53 points remaining. Good enough for now, better save something for later. As for my titles themselves, I've made some major progress, given how I previously almost had 100 spare points to spend. As a sorcerer, I've finally earned my 8th level after constantly meditating over the energies of both the Feywild and Shadowfell. Even the secret Valyrian tomes and scrolls one stole from the Citadel's private collection had helped me out, not that much from their content that mentioned some small trivia of the Valyrian freehold and dragon physiology, but from the residual magical aura still lingering on it. My draconic bloodline and storm deity soul allowed me to finally channel a fragment of the destructive waves of energy, like those created by the dragons. And let me tell you, they were much stronger than my chromatic orb. For now it was still restricted to only comes of lightning and thunder, which was already amazing by itself, given that I could kind of breath, force lightning, and Fusaro Da, a once in between short rests, but I'm still working on how to deal both radiant and necrotic damage from my mouth. Anything beyond that was still very unlikely at the moment. Sony would have to more frequently rely on my Eldritch Blast, Mind Sliver and Chromatic Orb. And since my rages weren't as alarming as they first were before my player's mind, my barbarian title reached its 9th level after basically living my days while constantly suppressing a storming rage whenever I could. Just because I wasn't shouting out loud didn't mean I wasn't in constant pain as my muscles tore themselves apart and my heart beat almost a 10 times over its healthy pace, only to finally allow me to duplicate my power and endurance. Those were hellish unending minutes that I sometimes had to endure while calmly reading a book or socializing more with the Hightowers. Only in combat during my night raids on the Undercity I felt all that rage bearable. But I got to say, with all the strength and toughness of a grizzly bear it gave me, it was definitely worth not prioritizing those stats in favor of my intelligence and stealth. And to combine business with displeasure, I found the best exercise to my will in raging while dedicating myself to find tranquility during meditation. With player's mind doing half the work for me, I succeeded in leveling up my monk's title up to 10, unlocking the purity of blood feature. No, nothing like the eugenic philosophy one might initially assume. Feature unlocked. Purity of blood. Your mastery of the Ki flowing through you makes you immune to disease and poison. Yeah, I can finally forget about drinking poison in order to become immune to it and just set sail to the island of Noth. Although I was already immune to disease thanks to my paladin title, it's better to have an alternative in case the gods ever decide to revoke their blessings over me. Besides that, I just continued to sharpen my skill with my ki. Next, as a bard, I got both music and regular oratory covered as soon as possible. And wouldn't you know, regular readings and studies counted more for this title than it did for wizards, which led me to raising it to 12th level after my work in the Citadel. My inspiring words were already so persuasive that others felt driven to succeed in whatever endeavor I pointed them to, sort of unlocking their hidden potential or something like it, but now my suggestions were basically commands even to those with a neutral disposition towards me. Think of it as a more subtle way of hypnotizing others than the way Johnny Depp did in his Dark Shadow movie. What else? Let me see. Fighting around during the night also raised my fighter title to 9th level, unlocking the Indomitable feature, effectively making all of my extra attacks count and lowering the chances of receiving a critical hit. And my Battlemaster trait unlocked for me the Fighting Spirit feature, that made me resistant to counters, stuns and knockouts. Honestly, I wasn't even aware that I could be knocked unconscious, probably since I never gave my opponents the luxury of thinking that they could afford taking it easy on me. Good thing I have this now. My serious studies with Paige made me a level 10 wizard, and I got plenty of rewards for it even before learning intermediate magic of the main 6 schools of magic. Chief among them were 3, transmutation, necromancy and divination. First was that after learning how to make transmutation alchemy permanent, and arduously studying the heartstone I got from a hag, I've been having some success in crafting what I came to call my transmuter's stone. In theory it was meant to bolster the transmutive magic of the one wielding it, or at least offer some minor physical enhancements. Sadly, it is still not complete and can't do much besides improving the results of alchemy. But with everything I learned from the dungeon under the Citadel, I'm sure I will be able to complete it in no time. Second came the School of Necromancy, which gave me a certain natural resistance to necrotic damage I came to call inuurement to undeath, and I'm on the verge of acquiring the magical ability of animating the dead from regular piles of bones or corpses. Animating the dead wouldn't be anywhere near as powerful in combat as controlling the higher levels of undeads found on most of the magical dungeons I've cleared. But that wouldn't matter because due to their lack of resistance to my control I could still use several of them as labor workers, with the perks of not having basic needs like sleeping, eating and drinking. Besides, if need be, some magical gear and they would be a match with even the best warriors of my time. But I will cross that bridge later once I get there. Third was divination, which gave me 2 spells for the price of 1, with the ability to cast, free of mana cost, a spell 1 class lower from the one I spend my mana points on. Like casting a third-class divination spell and unlocking for free a second-class spell of the same nature. That was probably easier to describe than to find the appropriate circumstance, which wasn't that easy to begin with, but I will make it useful one day. Oh, and it also gave me a freaking invisible third eye in my forehead that I could use once every short rest. Which sounds ridiculous, I know, but it granted me many options of special vision, such as more dark vision, comprehension to all written languages, perceive invisible creatures and objects within a 3 meters line of sight or see 20 meters line of sight into the ethereal plane. All interesting and neat options, but nothing currently essential to me. As for the other 5 schools of magic, evocation made all my offensive cantrips and spells more potent, while also more stable to avoid accidents to my environment and allies. Specifically, my chromatic orb now had 2 extra effects, force and psychic. With my second-class spells being quite literally a pillar of radiant light and a cloud of magical darkness that had the potential to deal necrotic damage, I had all types of damage covered. Illusion made the prospect of playing with my minor illusions and other similar spells much easier to manipulate while keeping them realistic even to closer inspection and interactions, for longer periods of time, in larger sizes and from faraway distances. All that in my current research was leading me to believe that there was a way of channeling the shadows of the Shadowfell into turning my illusions real. Conjuration made teleporting much easier and my influence over my summons nigh unbreakable, to the point of permanently doubling the number of subjects I could have under my control and expanding the pocket dimension I had for my rope trick. Not only that, but I was also looking for ways of reaching entities of both the plane of fairy and shadow. Abjuration got me sturdier barriers capable of deflecting ranged damage back and absorbing ranged spells into my pool of mana, as well as providing better physical magical defenses to my arcane lock and healing properties. Right now, I'm willing to focus on ways of intercepting and dismissing magic from other spellcasters, just in case any of my future disciples got the idea that they didn't need to obey their master. And enchantment let me naturally split the spells into 2, even after twining it, so I could now cast enchantments 4 times in a single use. As well as making it naturally harder for others to lie or hide things while in my presence. Plus, the connection with the Feywild was noticeably bolstering all my effectiveness in charming anyone and dealing psychic damage. Finally, my Order of Scribe trait gave me the Master Scrivener feature, enabling me to successfully create magic scrolls by using my wizardly quill, with my mana as ink, on a blank piece of paper or parchment and copying one spell from my awakened spellbook onto the scroll. For that, the chosen spell must currently be of first or second class and must have a casting time of at least a few seconds. Once in the scroll, the spell's power was enhanced, counting as the same level as I was currently capable of casting them. To cast the spell from the scroll, one had merely to fluently read it, though the scroll was hard to read to anyone without any basic arcane knowledge, and the spell vanished from the scroll whenever it was used. I know, my magic initiate perk allowed me to pretty much exploit it to my heart's content with prep time and have even second-class spells also be like cantrips. But you've got to see the bigger picture. I could finally have an army of spellcasters without having to commit to making them into full-fledged wizards. And better yet, the supposed restriction of 1 use per craft was a blessing in disguise. I certainly knew that there were plenty of nobles who would love to cast a few spells just for the thrill of it. Following with a similar title, as an artificer, I still lacked any trait out of it, but from brewing my 3 known elixirs and practicing some of my infusions, I got it to 7th level and improved my feature to Flash of Genius. Healing, swiftness and resilience elixirs got even better, while also mitigating more of its dose of toxicity if consumed in excess. Plus, the prospect of brewing spells into potions no longer seemed like a far-fetched idea to accomplish. And my latest infused item was a cross between arcane focus and mana refueling infusion, in the form of a metallic rod, capable of storing all the wasted mana my body constantly produces that wasn't being spent and keeping it in check while being stored. Yeah baby, the god mage is on its way. But jokes aside, I also had plenty of opportunities to gain XP by sneaking and infiltrating around the Undercity during the night with Tick, occasionally assassinating some high-ranked criminals and strong-arm others into submission, which earned me my 9th level as a rogue. My swashbuckler trait made me a natural charmer for my targets, either for taunting and complimenting, while dueling them. And my arcane trickster trait gave me another bonus in stealth with casting my subtle spells. Having said all of that, I was still getting used to my role as a blessed and druidic warrior while also looking for better ways of gaining XP for my paladin, cleric, druid and ranger titles. The new gods were the harder aspects to abide by. Other than channeling domains such as Peace and Twilight, I still had all the deal I had made with a literal god of death in the back of its own pantheon. As both a redeemer and avenger, it basically befalls on me to be the judge, jury and, depending on the case, either executioner or liberator. Don't get me wrong, if the old gods compelled me to become a fanatic tree-loving hipster that would much rather have his fellow men starve than hunting in the woods or harvesting the lands in exchange for great powers, I wouldn't do it. Thankfully, we seem to be on the same page in regards to nature, understanding how harsh it really was, being a dog-eat-dog world after all. So I might as well be the apex predator of the food chain if it's up for me to decide. In any case, I was surprised by the level of actual fun I was having with the benefits of being both a druid and a ranger, even while inside a large city such as Old Town. Title: Durandon Baratheon, Sorcerer LV8, Barbarian LV9, Monk LV10, Bard LV12, Fighter LV9, Wizard LV10, Artificer LV7, Rogue LV9, Paladin LV5, Cleric LV5, Druid LV4, Ranger LV3. Level: 23, 13%. HP: 460 460ths. SP: 460 460ths. MP: 23 23rds. Mana control: 100% advantage on concentration. Cantrips: Thaumaturgy, Minor Illusion, Minor Conjuration, Arcane Ward, Mind Sliver, Eldritch Blast, Spare the Dying, Decompose, Detect Magic, Guiding Arrow, Thorn Whip, Infestation. First Class: Arcane Weapon, Disguise Self, Unseen Servant, Mage Armor, Sleep Awake, Chromatic Orb, Ray of Sickening Fear, Guidance. Second Class: Alter Self, Magical Aura, Rope Trick, Arcane Lock, Paralysis, Starbeam, Invisibility, Darkness, Levitation. Sorcery Points: 16. Barbaric Rage: 4. Key Points: 20. Bardic Inspiration: 12. Action Surge: 1. Divine Points: 5. Wild Points: 4. Allegiance: The Iron Throne, Faith of the Seven Old Gods. PWR: less than 31 greater than. End: less than 32 greater than. Mob: less than 33 greater than. Int: less than 37 greater than. STL: less than 35 greater than. Def: 70 *, runed bronze segmented plate armor. Plus 100% immunity to non-magical piercing, slashing and bludgeoning damage plus 50% resistance to fire, cold, radiant and necrotic damage dragon scales, 50% magical damage absorption. Points: 53. Skills: Close list, less than power greater than. Athletics LV.41, Throwing LV.35, Swim LV.37, Lift LV.30, Tear Off LV.34, Run LV.30, Jump LV.34, Climb LV.46, Crawl LV.36, Bladed Weapon Mastery LV. 39. Blunt Weapon Mastery LV.20, Ranged Weapon Mastery LV.43, Long Reach Fighting Style LV.18, Mid Reach Fighting Style LV.36, Short Reach Fighting Style LV.30, Brawling LV.20, Punch Kick LV.20, Iron Dance Style LV.39. Less than endurance greater than. Breathing Technique LV.37, Meditation Technique LV.45, Pain Tolerance LV.36, Heat Damage Resistance LV.40, Cold Damage Resistance LV.40, Fall Damage Resistance LV.31, Poison Illness Damage Resistance LV.40, Acid Damage Resistance LV.17, Necrotic Damage Resistance LV.35, Radiant Damage Resistance LV.23. Less than mobility greater than. Quickness LV.37, Aim LV.48, Ambidextrous LV.34, Rope Skill LV.25, Dodge LV.30, Flexibility LV.27, Balance LV.29, Acrobatics LV.34. Less than intelligence greater than. Gibberish LV.37, Sing LV.38, Act LV. 35, Etiquette LV.37, Memory LV.40, Mathematics LV. 36, Poisons, Venom Knowledge LV.30, Medicine Knowledge LV. 35, Healing Technique LV.45, Agriculture Knowledge LV. 34, Common Tongue LV.50, Old Tongue LV.30, High Valyrian Tongue LV. 30, Dothraki Language LV.28, Ibonese Language LV. 28, Old Gascari LV.25, Summer Tongue LV.25, Trade Talk Bargain LV.20, Library Research LV.40, New Gods Lore LV.32, Heraldry LV.32, Cartography LV.38, Astrology LV.30, Warfare Knowledge LV.39, Convince LV.45, Cook LV.40, Teach LV.39, Animal Handling LV.38, Animal Train LV.35, Decipher LV.34, Leader LV.25, Economy LV. LV.30, alchemy, LV.20, blacksmith, LV.24, sexual pleasure, LV.28, seduce, LV.30, intimidate, LV.36, incite, LV.33, streetwise knowledge, LV.36, taunt, LV.30. Less than stealth, greater than. Hide, LV.40, subtleness, LV.37, blend in, LV.39, awareness, LV.38, observe, LV.45, disguise, LV.40, lie, LV.34, sleight of hand, LV.31, sneak, LV.37, dirty fight, LV.39, water dance style, LV.40. Less than magic, greater than. Magic affinity, LV.40, mana capacity and regeneration, LV.40. Perks. Player's body prodigy, mental map player's mind, sleep is for the dead, metamagic genius, inventory physician, chemist, linguist, observant, diplomat, empathic, actor, dual wielder, alert, sentinel, crossbow expert, sharpshooter, superior technique, fey touched, shadow touched, tutor, war caster, magic initiate, chef, keen mind, mobile, tough, dungeon delver, skulker, genius artificer. Features. Rage, metamagic, key, draconic resilience. Bardic inspiration, action surge, spellbook, tempestuous. Magic, storm aura, wrath of the storm, magical thinkering. Sneak attack, jack of all trades and master of all. Experimental elixir, infuse item, cunning expertise. Silver tongue, legerdemain hand, arcane armor, wizardly. Quill, awaken spellbook, divine smite, divine fury. Hands of healing and harm, extra attack, uncanny dodge, right tool for the job, emboldening bond, emissary of peace, rebuke the violent, channel divinity, balm of peace, lay on hand, divine sense, divine health, wild shape, wild companion, speech of the woods, vow of enmity, abjure enemy, twilight sanctuary, combat shapes, starry form, favored foe, natural explorer, dread skirmisher, shadow arts, dragon breath, purity of blood, indomitable, fighting spirit, master scrivener, flash of genius. Traits. Draconic bloodline, divine soul, storm herald, zealot, college of lore, college of eloquence, swashbuckler, arcane trickster, battle master, order of scribes, oath of redemption, way of mercy, peace domain, circle of stars, circle of the moon, oath of vengeance, twilight domain, gloomstalker, way of shadow, war magic. Time played. 6 years. Money. 150,000 GC, 2,000 SC, 10,000 CC, 400 NC. Dollar market. Inventory. Holy symbol, magical wand, 2x Valyrian steel gladius, dragonbone crossbow, goldenheart bow, runed bronze armor, glass candle, dragonbone pieces, chest of dragonglass, heartstone, elixirs, alchemist fire, meals and drinks, soul bag, Kama Sutra book, tiny athcoid in a jar. Equals 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 equals. After a day sailing the waters of the Sunset Sea. For the most part, our journey through the Reach had been uneventful, up until what promised to be a very relaxing time in the Arbor. Which was technically and legally part of the Reach, being one of the larger islands off the coast of Westeros, as big as any of the Iron Islands, it had maintained an element of cultural independence from the mainland. House Redwyn ruled here as they have for millennia, claiming descent from Garth Greenhand, as so many of the old petty kings of the Reach did. Like the rest though, they eventually succumbed to the Gardeners, then the Andals and finally the Targaryens, each time, commendably retaining their preeminent position as lords of the island, despite the change in overlord. Perhaps as a family, they were more politically canny than I give them credit for, given how tactfully they perceived which way the political winds were going and then picking their sites carefully. There were many credible reports, for example, that Aegon the Conqueror visited the Arbor more than once, before the Targaryen invasion of Westeros, to go hawking with the Redwyns. Obviously, becoming friends with the people with dragons was definitely a canny move given what was to come. Soon enough, Lord Redwyn received me with all the splendor a member of the royal family entitled to as soon as I stepped out of my ship. Welcome, my prince, to the Arbor. Lord Paxter Redwyn told me, bowing in respect while subtly displaying all his influence through the small platoon of soldiers in shining armor and an amazing view of his land. Even if I was already getting tired of all this show of wealth, I still found it amusing to watch the reaction of my companions, especially the ones just recently accepted into my care. While Pia always had her eyes shining with happiness as if she was living a fairy tale, Satin had an expression of someone who couldn't believe he wasn't dreaming and desperately wished to never wake up from it. Your hospitality is much appreciated, Lord Redwyn. I eventually nodded in respect to the older man's bow and followed it by immediately greeting him and his family. Lord Paxter Redwyn was stooped of shoulder, thin and balding with only a few orange tufts of hair remaining. Married to his cousin, Mina Tyrell, the sister of his liege lord, Mace Tyrell, thus making him twice a nephew of the Queen of Thorns, Olenna Redwyn. I wonder how many letters she has sent him after I left Highgarden. I thought in amusement. Lord Paxter and Lady Mina have had twin sons, Oris and Hauber, currently growing closer to their 8th name day, and a daughter named Desmara who was my age. A freckled young beauty with curly red hair and a sheepish smile. As Lord Redwyn led me and my retinue inside of his castle, he wasn't all that subtle in the way he almost shoved the shy Desmara to my side. It's a pleasure to meet you, my prince. She told me, oblivious to the way her brothers were hiding their laughter and Pia stared daggers at her. Picking the young maiden's hand, I kissed it and said, "The pleasure is all mine, Lady Desmara." She attempted to say, but immediately looked away, probably trying to hide her blushing face from me. Yeah, I think I just broke her. I mentally sighed, noticing Paxter's panicked expression at Desmara's reaction. You know what, I'm starting to grow annoyed at the increasing number of lords willing to throw their daughters at the first chance they had of having a queen with their blood on the Iron Throne. But for the sake of the young Redwyn girl's relationship with her family, I began to make small talk with Desmara, finding her much cuter than the gold digger that Linus Hightower was. She eventually commented on my hair and eyes like most people did and showed great interest in my comment about my features being proof of my father's house ties to the dragonlords that once ruled the realm before him. Noticing that we were getting along, after we accomplished the pageantry that was the guest rites and everyone in my group was shown where we would be sleeping for the next couple of days, her brothers eventually joined our brief talk while their father showed us their lands. Honestly, they bored me to death with their pettiness, but since I reminded myself that they were still kids and missed the parts that the primitive part of my brain was always after, I forgave their dullness and pretended to care. After that we continued to spend some time interacting, and although their father seemed to prioritize having me and Desmara interacting as often as possible, Lord Paxter also wished that his sons and I could develop some semblance of childhood friendships and gain a few favors for their family. They took me to do a little bit of hawking during the morning, sailing from Ryamsport during the afternoon and traveling around the island in the evening, eating our meals together in between those times. 7 hells, even when I took my time to pray in their sept, Lord Redwyn dragged all of his family to join, stating that they always prayed to the gods whenever they had the chance. But the trust I earned with Desmara was enough to have her admit to me that it wasn't true. Aside from the privacy I was allowed during the night to sleep, the only moment I was free from them was the brief delving I made into their own magical dungeon. Deciding to bring both Shadow, my feline familiar, and carrying my grimoire, Paige, on my left hand, the three of us interacted while I made short work of the low-level blights that spawned down here. The dungeon's interior was a mixture of loamy soil and thick roots, just like back a Highgarden, with the occasional pillar of skillfully carved wood depicting idyllic visages with perfectly cut and polished surfaces, covered by forms of fungus life that only added to its nature theme. As the tunnel we were traversing finally widened up, I sighted more of those wooden sculptures of horned green men, with those elaborate ornaments made out of living plants and numerous fruits ready to be picked. Reaching for a bunch of grapes with my legerdemain hands, I pampered myself with some while I had Shadow scout ahead in her magical form and tasked Paige with reassessing to me all the intermediate arcane knowledge I've gained from my visit to the dungeon under the citadel. Now that I no longer require 30 points of mana to cast third-class spells, I wanted them so badly. I even tested if Gobble, my pet mimic, was capable of feasting on those twigs, corpses, but the little creature much preferred the steaks I cooked. Alas, as we reached the end of the tunnel with barely any resistance to our progress, I activated the small opening in the wall before us, prompting the passageway leading to the treasure room to appear. And just like with Highgarden, it was basically an underground godswood, or private garden, if you will. However, the chamber itself wasn't as large as the one under the Great House of the Reach, though clearly going with the same theme. Not missing the upper silver ring lighting up a small signal to inform me I had unlocked the arbor, I noticed the colorful mosaic tiles on the ceiling that depicted a map of the entire island. On it, I found the location of a single weirwood tree that had been long forgotten to everyone. Standing in an area with sparse vines and fertile soil, I was actually surprised to find a chest full of gold in here. Casting my detect magic cantrip showed me no other hidden secrets here, which I guess explained the consolation prize that was rather uncommon in the magical dungeons of the Reach. So much for expectations, I guess. But I at least got to meet another weirwood tree south of the neck. Later, during my stay in his castle, Lord Paxter Redwyn remarked, "Sir Garyon has spread good word about your royal legion, my prince, and it has traveled all the way here. Business has thankfully flourished for you and those dealing with you, especially compared to everyone else lately. I've tasked Garyon and Tyget with the mission of slowly increasing my royal army power as their influence increased by the day on both land and sea. Acquiring equipment, horses, ships and supplies through the profit the legionaries were getting from keeping the peace and order in the realm. Although we have been focusing our efforts on the Westerlands, just currently slowly transitioning to include the Reach and Riverlands. I'm pleased to hear it, Lord Redwyn. I replied back with the appropriate decorum. I'm a firm believer that the best kind of deal is the one that is best for all those involved. Ah, so young and already so wise. The older man added in a rather apple polisher tone before sighing. I'm hopeful that my children will follow your example with time. Hopefully you might become great friends as well. Bold of you to openly presume it. I mused to myself while hiding my thoughts behind a charismatic smile. Though I took comfort in the fact that he never brought up their victories as Targaryen loyalists against my father during his rebellion. But regardless of that, despite being a year older, the twins Oris and Hobber, they weren't anywhere near the level of competence in both combat or strategy. And although their sister, Desmara, seemed less full of herself, it pains me to admit that she wasn't much different in terms of usefulness to me, being currently too naive and pampered by her family to be worthy of my trust. An interesting piece of trivia though, during the books, a marriage was once considered between Desmara and Davin, but was called off in order for him to marry a Frey. Staring at him, starting the day with some military drilling to my legionnaires in the open grassfield close by, I couldn't help myself from thinking. Poor man, despite your looks and wealth, you really don't have luck with girls. Desmara, like most girls I've personally met in this life, wasn't openly against the prospect of marrying the crown prince and eventually becoming queen. Her reluctance seemed more out of shyness than anything else. No woman would have me simping for them, but I gotta say, redheads with freckles had their charm. Regardless, even if things went terribly wrong with Sansa, I'm pretty sure there will still be plenty of female wildlings for me to try my luck. As for my buddy, Davin, he constantly sparred with my best legionnaires, pushing both him and them to grow stronger and faster in combat. But he also frequently spoke of his dream of becoming a knight who inspired greatness in others by committing brave deeds in battle, with the occasional mention of earning some glory as well. Someone whose mere presence in a small village would be enough to cause some bandits to seek easier prey. Or someone who could turn a city into a beacon of might against an invading army. Frankly, all that big talk was already showing results. With dedication and appropriate tutoring, Davin had just reached a point of excelling at mounted combat. Now learning from veteran knights, that I've personally picked and hired, how to lead a cavalry charge and how to guard those in his charge from harm. From how often I found him speaking with Garyon, I got that his next milestone would be to learn how to lead a fleet into battle. He favored using a sword and shield in duels, as that was his bread and butter, and the way he spun the shield sometimes to create openings was prodigious to say the very least. Most just held it up to block and that was it. Not Davin, though. He and Sandor began sparring every opportunity they had with me disguised as knight, so that they were prepared for faster and stronger opponents. Even Tyrion joined those matches, mainly because of my insistence as monk. Admittedly we got along even better whenever I assumed my identity as bard. The three of them were good enough to help me raise a few of my skills levels and better define some of my maneuvers as well. Most days though, Tyrion completely lost to Davin and Sandor, given how talented they were even compared to the high standards of imposed on my royal legion. But those absolute defeats were coming farther and fewer in between, with the little Lannister actually managing to come up with some surprisingly cunning tactics to either get a killing blow, or mutual kill. It doesn't matter how mighty you were, taking either a dagger or bolt to any vital organ would still kill you. Of course, that's unless you had the game system turning you into a game character like me, or perhaps something like an undead nature going for you. As for Sandor, his hate for his older brother was only matched by his respect for the mountain's deadliness and brutality. Even for a guy as tough as him, one stupid mistake and Gregor Clegane could pummel him to death. And I saw during our matches, while I transmuted my body to become my knight identity, he clearly viewed me and the mountain that rides as close comparisons for opponents. The hardest part was changing his mind in regards to the faith of the Seven and the noble concepts like knighthood. In any case, none of my companions have been able to uncover the reason for their sudden stark improvement with everything I set them to learn. Initially they didn't seem to even notice it, which speaks a little against their overall awareness, but it wasn't fair of me to expect it from them since I've given fair warning to both Rhaenys and Elise about it. But still, out of the three, Sandor was the one to become suspicious first. He never asked anything, but it was clear to me he wasn't oblivious to this abnormality, especially with Tyrion, of all people, managing to trade some blows with him. Ending that line of thought, I eventually met with my uncle Tyrion. You know something, my dear nephew. Besides the climate here, which is, I have to say, delightful, there are two things most people know the Redwyns and the Arbor for. The first is their navy. Tyrion told me while we wandered around Lord Paxter's castle. Most might think that the Iron Fleet of the Ironborn, the Gold Fleet of my father or the Royal Fleet of yours are the largest in Westeros, but it is actually the Red One's fleet. Agreeing with him, I said. I recall reading the records the Maesters had in the Citadel that informed that Lord Redwyn can currently call on 200 warships and perhaps 1,000 more whalers, cogs, trading galleys and the like if need be. Indeed, that might truly be the case. Garyon joined us, immediately understanding our topic of discussion and sharing what he learned from the Redwyns. They rival all the other fleets of Westeros in both warfare and trade aspects. And during your father's rebellion were responsible for inhibiting the support the ships of the Vale could offer your father's cause and raising the naval siege of his castle, Storm's End. Can we learn something from their shipwrights? I questioned, immediately assuming that just like with the numerically superior army the Reach could muster, their fleet also relied on quantity over quality. Like faster ways of building ships or training sailors. Most likely, great-nephew. Garyon nodded, understanding my meaning. Don't worry, I've already taken the liberty to look into it. By the time we leave everything will be completed and immediate improvements will be done to your legion's fleet. Good, I will trust it to you then. Now turning back to Tyrion, I noticed he still wanted to speak more about this region. Apologies for the interruption, uncle. Please, do continue. Right, the second thing about the Arbor was of course the wine. Tyrion finally resumed his initial comment about the Redwyns of the Arbor. With those vineyards that crisscross the island, the industry supposedly provides employment for many of the islanders in season, and even the lowliest wayside in here have cheap and plentiful vintages to choose from. The Arbor Gold, a sweet white wine, was perhaps the best known export and was often considered by those with a less refined palate to be the finest the continent had to offer. Although we've come across some samples during our stay in Aldtown, Tyrion was adamant that the best bottles stood on the island. And to his credit, as we were introduced to the seat of House Redwyn, Lord Paxter's personal wine cellar indeed contained a particular dark purple strong wine, which was rich and heady. But since I wasn't that much of a wine connoisseur, I had to take his word for its quality. Suffice it to say that if one ever got a chance to sample it, they would not turn it down. Which made it all so valuable of a trading good for my entrepreneuring trade company of Marines to possess access to. Do I have to worry about losing you to them? I asked jokingly, to which Tyrion replied in the same manner. I don't know, what is a dwarf to do with so many reasons to stay? He chuckled, but admittedly, the Reach is undoubtedly one of the better regions to live in. He suddenly flinched. Don't tell my father I said that. We are finally getting somewhere. I nodded with a smirk. Eventually, after remembering how popular Arbor Gold was, even back at the royal court in the capital, I had decided that there was still untapped potential for this product. The best part was that all the plants on the vineyards here revealed to me the secret behind the quality of this product the Redwyns were rich and famous for. That and the fact that the winters were slowly costing a heavy toll on their production. Now that I think of it, if I managed to produce a better version of the wine produced here, I might be willing to provide it as a reward payment to the best of my legionnaires at the end of each year. And, well, I digress once again. After staying with Lord Paxter and his family for almost a week, I decided to bookend my visit with a performance as bard on the Redwyns Ball Hall. I even took the opportunity to introduce more of my recipes for mouthwatering and nourishing food and drinks. Starting with all the songs that have already made me famous in this world, like Avicii and Jaskier's songs, and finishing it with another, original, one. Thriving even in the solely dependence of instruments instead of electronic methods that the medieval era was so known for, I began playing the appropriate chords to produce the tune I was looking for. Noticing the faces of both Pia and Satin, I was pleased to be won my way of having a fan club. And this next song had a lyric I've deemed very appropriate for the image I've been building for myself. If you leave me to my own device, I never had to compromise. This city's like a jungle, gotta make it mean. Put my fears right out of sight. Beat the hustle, better get it right. In a game where the strong survive, only the strong survive. I got the entire Redwyn family focused on me, having already earned their favor once again after my first few lines. These chains will not hold me down. They'll break and fall to the ground. Can't tame these lions inside. The power is raining like thunder ready for a fight. These lions inside. Yeah, these lions inside. Oh, yeah, these lions inside. Oh, yeah, these lions inside. I easily got both Tyrion and Davin's attention with that as well. I had to learn to be the hero, started only here from zero, in a city like a jungle I had to get mine. Never give, you gotta take. Be the catapult to storm the gates. 'Cause a champion is never giving in, seeing through till the end of days. Till the end of days. Showing my vocal talent and bringing my own harmony to the ball hall, I cheated a little by spending divine points and using my bomb of peace. These chains will not hold me down, they'll break and fall to the ground. Can't tame these lions inside. The power is raining like thunder ready for a fight. Yeah, these lions inside. These lions inside. Oh, ooh, can't tame these lions inside. Oh, ooh, can't tame these lions inside. I knew I got another success once I noticed the way my audience began singing with me. The ground that they're walking ain't cutting through this skin, hunting down their prey till the bitter end. The ground that they're walking ain't cutting through this skin, hunting down their prey till the bitter end. The ground that they're walking ain't cutting through this skin, hunting down their prey. Let the games begin. Now dancing to show my moves, I played the notes in my lute with more force and attempted to charm everyone in this castle that could hear me. These chains will not hold me down, they'll break and fall to the ground. Can't tame these lions inside. The power is raining like thunder ready for a fight. These lions inside. Yeah, these lions inside. Oh, ooh, can't tame these lions inside. Oh, ooh, can't tame these lions inside. Now, just to end things, I began playing a little slower and lingered in my final notes. The ground that they're walking ain't cutting through this skin, hunting down their prey till the bitter end. The ground that they're walking ain't cutting through this skin, hunting down their prey. Let the games begin. As the song ended, my silence was immediately occupied by the applause of both Redwin family and servants, but also my own retinue as well. Thanks for the attention and for being such wonderful hosts, I said, leaving the area reserved for singers and artists, and subtly switched places of my illusion of the crown prince. After that, we began packing our things and I had Garion send a letter to my legionaries, the ones left in the mainland of the Reach that hadn't come with me to the arbor, and had them gather once again to await my arrival. Taking another ship back to the continent, my companions and I were once again united with the bulk of the royal legion that followed me out of the Westerlands, now heading northeast into the heart of the kingdom. Staring out from my carriage at the passing scenery, with the company of both Pia and Satin, we continued to pass mile after mile of green verdant landscapes. There truly was nowhere else quite as lush as here, save perhaps the thin strip of the Vale of Arryn or the artificially created water gardens in Dornay, and this lushness brought bounty and people. In the north, one could travel for days without seeing a single other soul. The Vale, the Iron Islands, the Westerlands and even Dornay were partly or even mostly mountainous with small settlements scraping out a survival where they could, but not here. There were of course the Red Mountains and the Dornish Marches to the south and east, but the vast majority of this land was either flat or rolling hills, with rivers and streams crisscrossing the land. There were villages and towns everywhere, farms and homesteads. Meanwhile minor lords had their castles, or more often fortified manor houses, atop rises, hiring extra farm workers or hedge knights whenever there was needed. A bit over halfway from Aldtown, on our way back up towards Highgarden, there was Horn Hill, some way off the road set atop the hill it was named after. And the road to this impressive castle took us away from the lush lowlands I've been describing, to the foothills of the Dornish Marches. These were forested hills, teeming with wildlife. As hunting here was bountiful, and as a result the archers of Hornhill were rightly famed. For indeed, the sigil of House Tarly was a red archer on a green background. House Tarly, who have held this land for time immemorial, were one of the martial lords, tasked with protecting the Reach from incursions from Dornay, which they had done successfully for years. Perhaps most famously, and recently, the Tarleys were at the forefront of the fight against the Vulture King, the first Vulture King in the early years of the Targaryen rule, for there were many. An outlaw Dornishman raising an army to avenge itself on the Targaryens after their many attempted invasions. This Vulture King was hunted down and killed by the armies of the various Marcher lords, including the famous Lord Samwell Tarly or Savage Sam Tarly as he became known afterwards. Speaking of it, meeting Sam the Slayer before he became the fattest member of the Night's Watch was just as weird as it was to be constantly talking with a teenager Tyrion. His 3 younger sisters weren't anything more than children, but from their behavior I immediately saw how rigid their father was. As for the golden boy, Dickon, gods, wasn't your father supposed to have you as his favorite son? I can't believe Bronn was the first to laugh at his name, for now he was still just a toddler. My prince, as Lord of House Tarly, I want to tell you, Lord Tarly greeted me with the appropriate respect one was expected to show towards a member of the royal family, but unlike all the other lords that received me, Randall Tarly wasn't overbearingly polite in his words. He was a narrow man, no doubt, but also clearly iron-willed and shrewd, receiving me with no frivolous spending of his wealth just to appease my vanity. That Hornhill welcomes you. I nodded in acknowledgement, mimicking his manner and immediately noticing a glimpse of surprise in his face, probably not expecting a child of 6 to match his gaze. After a dinner of venison and sweetmeats, with a night in a comfy bed at Hornhill for all of my closer associates who grew tired of sleeping in both ship and carriage, the hospitality here was courteous and not the kind I could ever complain about, but still far from warm. At least, until my legionaries began sparring with Tyrell soldiers, which clearly the meticulous superior battle commander wasn't expecting such disparity between our forces in our favor. Sure, I was striving in the fact that most lords viewed my royal legion as the whim of a spoiled prince pretending to be a battle commander, and our small numbers corroborated with that sentiment since quality was much more difficult to notice while I had them mostly busy with hunting outlaws and patrolling the land. All of that would definitely change once we faced our first real battle. After all, Tyget and the Blackfish weren't playing around with selecting and training men for my royal legion. My royal legion might not be bloodied nor have the same level of battlefield experience as a group, yet, but their individual quality shouldn't be underestimated in any circumstance. Davin and Sandor were undoubtedly amongst my best combatants, in both mounted combat and individual duels. And even Tyrion managed to compete against the Tarly archers with his crossbow during one of their hunts, which certainly was no small feat considering their famous reputation. I might be repeating myself by this point, but I did end up enjoying my time alongside my three companions. They were easy to be around, with Tyrion contributing with his quick tongue and good humor, Davin with his optimist yet enduring demeanor and Sandor with his realistic honesty and brutal efficiency. Davin and Sandor didn't drink that often, preferring water to wine, which I really appreciated since I've been trying to put Tyrion on a better path. To the dwarf's horror, of course. But I just couldn't take someone acting drunk all the time. Another source of motivation for me was the party system. I was eager to push the limits of that aspect of the game to see what it could offer. Since I had the choice to choose the perfect builds for my party members, I've led Rhaenys towards the path of a rogue and monk to better serve as my master of whispers and Elisa Bard to better serve as my master of coin, with the added bonus of introducing her to arcane knowledge in order to make her a wizard and artificer. Probably due to how much I trusted her. Retreading that same path I've taken with Rhaenys, prioritizing mobility and stealth stats while gaining proficiency with certain skills, I was pleased to see how much compatible it was with Tyrion. Focusing his training on the art of stealth and body improvement, relying on speed, subterfuge, elegance and charm in equal parts. As he kept finding clever ways of coming out on top in single combat, as well as fighting with multiple weapons like daggers and crossbows while safely darting away from an opponent thanks to his smaller frame and lighter weight. Teaching him dirty fighting and water dance was also a very fun experience for me, as I was shaping him into a fusion between Bronn and Syrio. However, since I didn't have the vast quantities of criminals to raise his experience like I did with Rhaenys, I had to make do with the eventual bandits and animals to hunt. I gotta give it to you, dear nephew, this fancy footwork you've learned with the Bravasi fencer is quite impressive. Tyrion told me after one of his training sessions with my monk identity. I've been helping him with how to land a strike and then slip away without reprisal, making sure he gave no opportunity for others to exploit. In contrast, with my superior awareness, I was the perfect tutor to help him get the basics of sneak attacks. But I didn't want him to be overconfident with his new skills, so despite his natural advantages, my alert and mental map perks were too much for him to handle. You indeed have a sharp mind, Lord Tyrion, with a knack for finding the solution to just about any problem. I once complimented him while pretending to not notice him sneaking behind me, before flipping him over to the ground after he failed to sneak attack me. But when stealth is no longer a choice, you should try using your charisma to taunt your targets. Make them act without thinking in order to punish their folly. Arg, right, I guess I can come up with some one-liners. Tyrion skillfully rolled away from me, wiping his forehead sweat with a smirk before giving his best shots trying to bait me. It served as a weaker version of my vow of enmity, or a bardic inspiration of opposite effect, which weren't bad against regular foes, but lacked the power to influence me in any way. Still, I could see that his skill was improving at an incredible pace. Let's see, nimble evasions and deadly sneak attacks of both rogues and monks, but also a little bit of charming taunts and weapon proficiency of bards and fighters. Oh, I also made good use of his great intellect to have him become experienced with surviving and exploring. Making him acquainted with nature was considerably harder, but our constant campings in between the castles we visited were sufficient opportunities. And the larcenous arts was something he picked up by himself. He wasn't ready to clean a magic dungeon by himself, but he was at least capable of fending for himself if the need ever arises. And if things continue on this path, he would serve as a living example of what my Legion's scouts should aim to become. As for Davin, my natural fighter, he was also another one of my main experiments. I wasn't ready to risk overstepping my bounds with the new gods by naming someone that wasn't even knighted as their paladin or cleric, much less both of them, but I couldn't expect Davin to be satisfied with either the role of a rogue or a bard. even if he did end up picking a few things from both titles. The best fighters shared an unparalleled mastery with weapons and armor, as well as a thorough knowledge of the skills of combat. They should all be well acquainted with death, both meeting it out and staring it defiantly in the face. So I incentivized Davin fairly early to act more independently, either seeking arduous training with me as knight or joining other legionnaires to fight some bandits elsewhere. Which meant he was growing at an even faster pace than Tyrion. And thanks to him I finally had proper sparring matches to raise my skill with the shield, as well as finally having some progress with learning how to properly handle great weapons and polearms. Meanwhile Davin memorized several fighting styles I taught him, and noticed that soon enough he carried the title of fighter, allowing him to use his stamina to replenish his health in certain conditions and even boost his mobility stat. It was his own action surge which fortunately allowed him to actually face me in a serious duel. Sure, I didn't use my Valyrian weapons or my magic, but that simple fact was enough to baffle me. Unsurprisingly, my teaching skill was proving to be one of my most broken abilities after I bought the tutor perk, probably even above animal taming and training by this point. Keep in mind that combat is in fact an academic field, which includes subjects beyond battle such as weaponsmithing and calligraphy. I kept preaching to Davin as my knight identity, who attentively learned everything without doubting me. You know how to craft weapons? He suddenly asked, realizing I've once mentioned that I wore and wielded my own craft in combat. As a matter of fact, I do. I nodded, reminding the teachings I got from Tobo Mott. If you prove yourself capable, I might guide you through the basics after you're done studying all the treaties and manuals of combat the prince got for you. Not every fighter absorbed the lessons of history, theory, and artistry that were reflected in this build I was leading him. Just ask Bronn for confirmation, but those who embodied it would become well-rounded fighters of great skill and knowledge. And that was precisely my goal with this experiment. I wanted to push my legionnaires even farther than I've already had. But I required a fully tested plan before attempting to alter what I've spent a year worth of constant drills trying to assemble. This superiority depended upon his grasp over the maneuvers I taught him, which would serve as a martial equivalent of spells, and his ability to study his enemies through the use of his observe skill should be enough to cover any gap between him and them. And just like Tyrion, I stacked on top of this dedication towards a simple title, another one that complemented well. While Tyrion was rogue first, but also striving towards the title of bard and monk, Davin began as fighter and was finally making some progress towards becoming a barbarian as well. However, contrary to me, he had neither Stormlander's blood or divine soul, that only led me to theorize he could still get the zealot trait through sheer devotion and faithfulness towards the gods. As for my faithful hound, I had something else planned for him. In any case, the cherry on top of my stay in Hornhill was undoubtedly when I wiped the floor of the training yard with his best warriors while disguised as knight. I even got the attention of Satin when I faced 7 men all at once. Raging while action surging allowed me to easily weaponize and splinter all the wooden weapons the Castellan of Hornhill gave us against my opponent's protection gear and shields. Some even joked I was the next coming of the legendary Savage Sam. I even showed these Westerosis a little bit of the awesomeness that was hand-to-hand martial arts. I'm sure Satin must have noticed some similarities in the fighting style of both rogue and knight, but I managed to effortlessly switch the sneak attacks and assassination moves for my flurry of blows and disarming moves. Scandalous was how these uncivilized people almost began labeling my refined dance of fists and kicks as just fancy brawling. But I proved them wrong once I challenged their best archers to shoot at me, not only to catch their best attempts of humbling me with my bare hands, but also throwing all of their arrows and bolts back at their feet. Or in one occasion, where I got a little carried away, I destroyed one of the challengers' bow. After showing off what I was capable of, the Tarly soldiers began to nickname my knight identity as the champion of the fighter. Which seemed to make Satin finally understand all the foreshadowing I've been not so subtly presenting to him. This time however, I kept my bard personality benched since I doubt Lord Randall would appreciate the artistic skill and refinement I could display for him and his family. As well for Monk, since the realm wasn't yet ready for the prospect of learning that not only magic was real once again, but that it could be wielded into spells. But before leaving Hornhill and heading onwards to another castle, after unlocking another magical dungeon, filled with undead archers and just a little bit of gold as a reward, I've decided not to waste the opportunity and spoke directly with Lord Randall Tarly. Randall was a lean and balding man with a short, bristly gray beard. A war veteran soldier, considered one of the finest battle commanders in Westeros. He prized courage and martial ability above all, which would lead him to eventually despise his eldest son, Samwell, who was fond of music and songs, preferring books over weapons and soft fabrics over armor. A timid craven, afraid of anything related to bloodshed and violence was everything Randall despised the most, which was a hell of an irony for him. Especially because the Lord of Hornhill always noticed how insecure and awkward his son was, but failed to notice, or perhaps didn't even care, how observant and intelligent Sam was. Samuel was around my age, so his cowardice and softness were yet to be noticed by Randall as something out of the ordinary, probably still believing that his eldest son would still grow into a fine man ready to lead his household soldiers into battle. Besides that, his second son, Dickon, was still far too young for any comparison to be made between him and Sam. Back to my bargain with Lord Tarley. I want to hire your services as a battle commander for my Royal Legion. I spoke clearly with the Lord of Hornhill, showing my maturity by not relying on cheap intimidation tricks by having Sandor or my disguised Death Knight standing beside me. The man blinked once or twice, a sign I became used to associate with the fact that I had once again surpassed his expectations, not believing what he just heard. Not only was I, a young prince who had plenty of men to do my bidding, directly negotiating with him, but I did it so without any supervision or validation from others. Hire me, my prince, I don't think I understand it. He replied with an intrigued look, not because he doubted if I had any need for someone like him. The man was well aware of my Royal Legion, but rather because he didn't expect to be approached by me of all people. Yes, the Royal Legion had been publicly raised under my banner and name. But I was still too young to actually lead anyone in battle, much less make such political moves, so Randall probably assumed that someone like my uncle or grandfather were actually in charge of things until I came of age. Most lords I've been visiting did presume the same, like Mace Tyrell, Baylor Hightower and Paxter Redwyn, but Lord Tarley was the only one willing to openly question my capacity. Precisely, Lord Tarley. As I believe you are already aware of, I've Sir Tygett Lannister to instruct my men in the martial ways of the Westerlands and Sir Brynden Tully to do the same with the martial traditions of the Riverlands. I replied confidently. I've been thinking about new ways of improving my legionnaires' efficiency in battle as well as their presence here in the Reach. Hearing you were exactly what I needed led me to pay this visit to you and your family. The Reachman acknowledged my solid reasoning and sheer resolve as a confident yet respectful answer to his unspoken questions. My out-of-ordinary stature and title as Crown Prince were particular aspects that, although weren't enough to scare him, seemed to help compel him to actually view me as someone worthy of his respect. Apologies if it's insolent of me to ask, but who did you hear that from, my prince? Lord Tarley made another question, still measuring every action I took before him. He wasn't a player of the game in the level of Tywin or Alina, but the man certainly had a keen eye for people in regards to militaristic matters. Such a putty for him that I was cheating my way through this conversation with the many buffs to my skill of persuasion. Insolence of you. Nonsense. Lord Tyrell was the one that convinced me to seek you out. I momentarily gave in to my propensity of speaking in figurative terms, which only seemed to confuse Randall at first. You see, after spending a fortnight at Highgarden, I've had my fair share of hearing Lord Tyrell's boasting stories about his famous battles. But the one that caught my attention the most was the very same he claimed to have defeated my father after he had just won 3 consecutive battles against the Targaryen loyalists. And Lord Tyrell briefly mentioned your involvement in it. Randall Tarley almost snickered at the notion of Mace Tyrell assuming credit for his effort and military success only to be briefly mentioned as a footnote, but the Lord of Hornhill didn't dare speak against his liege lord. Nonsense, of course, I suddenly announced, startling the old man, probably guessing his own thoughts. The Tyrells have a bad habit of reclaiming what isn't even theirs to claim. Lord Tarley finally spoke up after sympathizing with my opinion. No disrespect to my liege lord's house, my prince, but their men so often prefer to hide behind their women's skirts. That may be, but from the brief time I've spent with his older sons, I'm hopeful they might finally be heading towards ending that tradition. Lord Tyrell's first son seems to be a wise and cunning person that has a certain wisdom to make his own choices, while the second son shows a certain knack for combat and military skills. I certainly hope that is the case, my prince. Lord Tarley said, no longer sporting his usual stern face. From the way the old man's attitude had changed after he heard my comment in regards to House Tyrell, it seemed I finally found something to hook him into assisting my Royal Legion to grow stronger. That and his pride, of course. Now, let us return to my offer. I shifted the focus of our conversation back to where I wanted. I'm aware that you can't be absent from your responsibilities as Lord of Hornhill for too long, but that's why I'm requesting to build a long-term garrison for the best of the best among my soldiers from the Reach to learn how to fight in unity and order. Of course, all the provisions required to feed and equip these legionnaires will be provided, alongside some generous payment for your good work. The old man eventually raised his eyebrow, taking the 6-year-old me seriously enough, just like Tywin Lannister did after I told him about my mother and uncle's affair. That certainly can be arranged, my prince. Randall Tarley finally gave in to my proposal. And I accept your offer. In my opinion, it's about time the Seven Kingdoms raise a royal army, so it's in our best interest to make sure it's in the best shape it can possibly be. Agreed, I said before finally asking. Your son, Samuel, is the same age as me, is he not? I believe so. 6, 7, my prince. It was clear to me that he had forgotten about that simple fact, proven by his unusual reaction. Would you be interested to have him fostered alongside me by Lord Tywin Lannister? I tossed out the verbal bait and waited for him to bite. If things were still supposed to follow the canonical timeline, Lord Tarly was working on having Sam fostered at the Arbor, and in exchange he was expecting to ward one of Lord Redwyn's sons and most likely plant the seeds of future marriages between the houses. But that would end terribly, with Sam being considered unfit to be made a page, and that would be the start of the great animosity between father and son. It would be an honor, my prince. Randall Tarly uncharacteristically broke character once again and offered his older son to be raised in another kingdom without hesitation. Guess I underestimated his expectations for his heir. Such a doting father. Perhaps he was hoping that whatever methods Tywin used to shape his dwarf son into a talented marksman could also work on Samwell. Or even the training both my knight and monk aliases might be offering to my legionnaires. After all, before being desperate enough to have Sam sent to the wall in order to join the Night's Watch, Lord Tarly tried even to bathe his older son in Oroc's blood after some Carthene warlocks claimed it would raise his valor. Suffice to say that handing his eldest son in a silver platter to grow alongside the crown prince wasn't the farthest Randall Tarly would be willing to go. Excellent, I replied before shaking hands and sealing our deal. Unbeknownst to Randall, I was also secretly feeding the mimic disguised as my coin pouch with my other hand and having my cat stand vigilant for anyone that might want to eavesdrop on our conversation. The 12th of June 2021. The 12th of November 2021. The 25th of December 2021. The 24th of July 2022. Hope this chapter is of your liking. Anything you wish to ask or suggest, feel free to do so. Check out my auxiliary chapter if you still haven't. Thanks as always for your attention and please be safe. Any problems with my writing, just point them out and I will correct them as soon as possible. Sorry for the constant delays. Asterisk as for the constant info dumps about the logistics of raising and maintaining a personal army, I will try to tone it down since most of you seem to not enjoy it that much. Cold sweat smile. I'm aware that my writing skills aren't that high to make it more of a pleasant reading experience. Sorry if it really bothered you. Shout out to both fics. The latter, by Twubs, at fanfiction.com and Purple Days, by Varus, at forums.spacebattles.com. Really digging both stories. Asterisk 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 to those that aren't fans of the MC revealing his powers to people, I have 3 arguments as to why I'm not keeping it a complete secret. First, he will eventually be known as a powerful individual capable of wielding magic. Second, it's much more helpful for those serving him to be made aware of some aspects like his magic, in order to either persuade them or merely make them useful in helping the MC work with his plans. Third, it helps me avoid writing everything as a journal of everything that is happening without dialogues. Asterisk 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 Merry Christmas everyone. Santa Christmas tree gift grin. I released this chapter in Christmas Eve cold sweat smile. Creation is hard, cheer me up. Vote for me. I tagged this book. Come and support me with a thumbs up. Like it. Add to library. Have some idea about my story. Comment it and let me know. Your gift is the motivation for my creation. Give me more motivation. Daichi_TBR 193 Creators Thoughts. 282 comments 0 vote. Champions of the Gods and the 7th Name Day. Durandon's Pav. After spending some time roaming around the Kingdom of the Reach without relying too much on the Rose Road, I was left wondering if the Riverlands wasn't initially a segment of the same territory that the Gardeners eventually lost to the Ironborn. Sure, the regions the Tullys were lords of weren't known for their fertility and massive population, but they were still more fruitful than its neighboring kingdoms, the Crownlands and Westerlands. Not to mention how similar the Mander River was to the Trident. With its upper reaches being muddy and rough, only allowing shallow draft boats to sail freely, but by the time it reaches lower enough, the waters settle down, becoming clear, calm and are navigable by seagoing vessels that exit the continent through Aldtown. On my way out of Horn Hill, instead of having my retinue stopping by Highgarden, as delightful as it was on our first stay, I decided to have my retinue push on upstream alongside the Cocklewent, one of the tributaries of the Great Mander River that was leading us to Ashford. During one of our brief stops in order to allow my marching legionnaires some rest and to replenish our supplies, I was approached by someone soon after sending Shadow off to hunt in the nearby wood. My prince, I've just wanted to say that it is an honor. A slightly rotund kid, with dark hair, pale eyes, and a small face still marked with baby fat announced itself to me. I immediately turned to face my latest follower, Samuel Tarley, heir of Hornhill. Around a decade younger and probably weighing half as much than his book counterpart when joining the Night's Watch. Tell me, Samuel Tarley, are you a stammerer from birth? I questioned, staring at him with my heterochromatic eyes while tying my mismatched hair, having enough of communing with nature. Sam winced meekly. And no, why your grack? I mean, my prince. Then speak clearly. I rose to my full height, towering over the kid my age while subtly activating my bardic inspiration through my oratory. After pausing for a moment to calm himself down a little, Sam finally replied, this time more sure of himself. Yes, my prince. I smiled before placing a hand over his shoulder. Much better. The timid boy nodded his head in acknowledgement. So, Sam, may I call you Sam while we are speaking privately? I immediately started to establish a bond of friendship between us. Of course, my prince. Sam replied without stuttering this time. Splendid. Call me Don then. Titles do grow tiresome during prolonged dialogues. I remarked and moved while signaling for him to follow. If I might be bold enough to inquire, but, why am I here? He asked with more confidence this time. Don. You are just like your father, straight to the point. I appreciate that, I openly admitted before raising two fingers. There are two main reasons. First one being because of your name. I can see the reason behind it. House Tarley might not be the most influential house of the Reach, but certainly isn't one to be scoffed at. Sam began muttering more to himself, like a medieval version of Izuko Midoriya from MHA. Exactly. I broke him out of his ramblings, making him go red in embarrassment. And the second reason is due to who you are. The individual standing right in front of me. Because, of me? Sam asked, surprised. I've heard you are fond of music and songs, preferring books over weapons and soft fabrics over armor. I said while noticing the tome in his book holster being one of the Lord of the Rings copies of Left Behind in the Citadel to be sold to the influential houses of Westeros. I then stepped past him and looked forward at the distance, prompting Sam to look at my back. Also that you are a timid craven, afraid even at the thought of violence. He lowered his head in shame, again. I understood that just because his father hadn't reached the point of openly stating that he would murder his own son if he didn't join the Night's Watch, their relationship was already much closer to what Tywin and Tyrion had instead of a healthy father and son relationship. Samuel began his stuttering, but I interrupted him. Although you are insecure and awkward, I know that you are also observant and intelligent. I added, pretending to not have noticed his previous slip. As I've convinced your father with the premise that, technically, like me, you will be officially known as Ward of the Rock, page to my grandfather. The young Tarley remained silent, understanding I still had more to say. But in actuality, I will have you trained to one day assume your father's place as an officer in command of my Royal Legion in the Reach. Approaching the saddle of the black sand steed I bought from the first Dornish merchant I came across in the marches, I pretended to retrieve a small crossbow of lighter poundage mostly used for training aim and handed it to him. I understand that marksmanship is a serious tradition in your house. But I'm also aware of your current shortcomings, so I won't be forcing the warbow on you yet, so what do you say? Are you willing to join my party of companions? Samuel's eyes displayed his inner overthinking as the boy held his breath for a brief moment, only to eventually shake his head in agreement. I am. Gotta give credit to the craven plump kid, he at least knows when to brave out. Once he shows enough skill with the longbow and manages to hunt something, I might introduce him to some arcane knowledge as I've done to Qyburn, even if just to make him more loyal to me. For now I still had to guide him through the tutorial, like I did with both Tyrion and Satin, both individuals with close to zero experience with combat before I stepped in and managed their training. Now, back to my journey. As I've already accounted for the Tyrell's chivalric tradition back when I was visiting their castle, it was apparent that this was also the case throughout the region of the Reach. Pia and Satin never seemed to grow tired of the chivalrous nights and entertaining tournaments we've been making our way through. Though Satin wasn't as approachable as Pia, acting always so busy as he began showing signs of growing into a clean freak. It probably has to do with his early childhood and my recent intervention as rogue, but save for the moments he spends admiring the sky, the boy rarely shows emotion, giving a cold impression to others. Satin's manner of speaking to others than me and my friends tends to be very blunt, even to the point of sounding insulting sometimes. While his comments are often coarse or inappropriate, they are mostly out of his lack of understanding of complex social behavior and interaction. I'm glad you finally warmed up to Satin. I told Pia, during another one of our brief stops. Yeah, he isn't that bad. She told me awkwardly after drinking some water, pretending she didn't almost mistake Satin for a girl again. A little too shy and weird, but thankfully not out of laziness. I see. I smiled, noticing how uncomfortable Pia was as she slowly sat closer to me, clearly trying her best to not get caught. Breaking the awkward silence, I called her name. Pia. Yes. The young girl immediately turned her head and answered with a nervous smile, probably afraid of having overstepped her boundaries. I really appreciate having you around. I finally said in a calming manner, but once I saw her confused expression, I continued while gazing at the horizon. I remember the day we first met, around a year ago. Besides your rare beauty, what drew my attention to you was your heart. Noticing how she was still staring at me, I heard her response after a gentle chuckle. Hey, that's the day I will never forget, of you arriving through the main gate of Harem and later that night sneaking up to explore the castle, because it forever changed my life. Following my gaze at the small tournament nearby, I noticed her wiping a tear off her cheek. Sometimes I can't even believe that this is all real. That, you, are real. Wish I could say that this time I was the one confused, even if just a little. But I was well aware of how she grew to idolize me, probably because of all the social buffs my titles as a bard and connection to the Feywild gave me. Some nights, I have nightmares that I will wake up back to my life on Harrenhal, as just an ordinary servant girl without parents. That you never stopped by, or never noticed me. Pia began shaking and I could sense that she was about to break in tears. That I would no longer hear you sing those wonderful songs and amazing tales. That I won't be needed by you or. Suddenly holding her in my arms, I calmed her down. There was no hurry for us to exchange words, just being there for a moment was more than enough, so the two of us remained still for a minute or two. But as cliché as it would appear to be, we were eventually joined by someone else. Shadow, where or why? Forgive me, but am I interrupting something? Satin suddenly asked from behind us, surprising only Pia since I'd sensed him walking towards us. As Pia gave out a jump of surprise and immediately stared daggers at the oblivious boy, I was the one to reply without turning to face him. As a matter of fact, yes. Would you mind giving us some privacy? Finally reading the room, Satin almost bowed down. I am so appalled. Raising my hand and silencing him, I remarked. There's no need. Just excuse us. Why yes. He bowed his head and hurried away, missing my wild companion, Shadow, who was hiding in a nearby bush and apparently laughing her ass off. Girl, I startled her as I told her through our mental bond. We will talk later. Yes, master. I heard her quick response before noticing Pia's angry grunt. And just as I was beginning to like him, she said feeling our previous moment was ruined. Gently calming her down once again, I remarked. Don't take it personally, I'm sure he didn't mean to interrupt. He probably just spoke up so we wouldn't think he was intentionally eavesdropping on any conversation we were having. But, we were hugging. Pia argued, half angered at Satin and half embarrassed at me. You know, I'm not supposed to say anything about it. But Satin has had a very harsh upbringing, so certain ignorance in regards to social behavior is still expected of him. I hinted about the boy's past on the undercity, while still not willing to expose it without his consent. What do you mean, Don? Pia questioned, a little worried by my serious tone. It's more of a private matter that only he can decide to share. I shrugged. But believe me when I say that you should have more patience with him. Pia looked at Satin, who was standing guard so no one else would interrupt us, from over my shoulder. I believe you. Excellent, I replied before resuming our bonding session. I think you are ready to learn something from me. I am. She stared at me with hopeful eyes. Indeed, as much as I appreciate your aid in cleaning and cooking, I believe you could be extremely helpful with healing. I see. Lord Tyrion informed me of your silver chain in medicine. Pia wasn't worried about hiding her excitement in the prospect of becoming more useful to me and also spending additional time together. So, when do we start? Smiling at her enthusiasm, I retrieved one of my parchments and showed her some of my drawings. Curiously, abjuration and necromancy magic were very informative about living beings. We still have some time. Let's begin with basic anatomy. Yes. Pia immediately nodded back, but I could still feel Shadow's gaze on us. What's gotten into her? I thought to myself before making good use of my tutor perk. Later, as even some of the smaller towns we passed by also seemed to be hosting small tourneys to bring glory to their lords, with entrance rules that were very stringent. Similar to the tournament made to celebrate my 6th name day back at the capital, for only true knights were allowed to enter the jousts. Considering how strange it was since in other regions anyone with a lance and a horse was allowed to enter the lists, and many's the mystery knights made a name for themselves in this way. Barristan the Bold, for one, who at the age of 10 donned the armor of a mystery knight and entered a tourney at Blackhaven, seat of House Dondarrion in the southwestern Stormlands. But it was a lot rarer in the Reach, where entrants were often required to prove their status as knights before entering. Speaking of which, following the trail of small tourneys brought me to the one taking place in Ashford. Ashford's castle was perhaps, on the face of it, not the kind of place one might expect a royal prince to linger on this tour out of all the wonderful and unique places in Westeros, for it was considered in many ways very like every other town in the Reach. It had fields around it, providing bountiful crops in season, a Lord Bannerman to the Tyrells, overseeing the town and its environs from his castle of middling and no particular note. Don't get me wrong, it was a fine castle even for landed knights like my Swernshield's house, Clegane's Keep. Triangular, so a little reminiscent of Riverrun, with round towers in the Andal style and thick walls. But beyond that, it was nothing special. The town in here had a rather humble attraction. The houses were uniformly fetched with whitewashed walls, similar to many other small towns in the Reach. What was actually special about this place was its history, for in the not-too-distant past, this place had hosted two noteworthy events in history of the Seven Kingdoms. The first was the tourney held here in the meadow south of the river in the year 209 AC. It's a curious tale, I will let you know in advance. A hedge knight of unknown provenance got into a dispute with Prince Aerion Targaryen, Brightflame, which resulted in the extraordinary spectacle of a trial by 7, with Targaryen princes on both sides. Resulting in Prince Baelor, the Prince of Dragonstone and heir to the Iron Throne at the time, dying and being cremated here at Ashford Castle. What made this story all the more remarkable was that the hedge knight whose honor the prince died for was none other than Sir Duncan the Tall. The then unknown future Lord Commander of the Kingsguard and his squire, Aegon Targaryen Egg, whose ultimate ascent to the throne as Aegon V, or Aegon the Unlikely, would never have happened but for this tragic death. Like I've said, a remarkable tale indeed. The second noteworthy event here was the Battle of Ashford during Robert's Rebellion. Right after my father had amassed his army at Storm's End and won his legendary 3 battles in a day at Summerhall, naturally his next ambition was to head up to Riverrun to meet with the armies of his allies, Ned Stark and Jon Arryn. Robert gave King's Landing a wide berth and before heading north, came here to Ashford. Only to be confronted by the vanguard of the army of the Reach, the Tarleys, who I've interacted with about a couple of weeks ago. As a smaller force somehow managed to push back Robert Baratheon's army, inflicting the only defeat my father suffered during that year-long struggle. Which perhaps could have been the end of his ambitions, but when the bulk of the Tyrell force arrived, they inexplicably didn't press the advantage, instead heading off far from the action to Storm's End. It was almost as if they didn't want to be involved or complicated in case their side ended up losing the war. But to suggest that would be quite a conspiracy theory, I'm sure anyone would agree. Right, perhaps I'm giving too much credit to Lord Mace Tyrell. In any case, I've informed my retinue that we will be spending a couple of days here and enjoying our last stop in the Reach. From where I had my camp raised, there was a fine tree standing alone by the river and an open sky that would allow me a great view of the stars. Perhaps even watch the small tourney taking place nearby or just delve into another magical dungeon after speaking a little with Lord Ashford. Though if not for the loot, these dungeons seem to be suddenly getting awfully boring. Maybe what I need is some company to make it less dull. Later in the following day, as the sun had just set in the horizon, I found myself far away from my retinue's camp, holding my breath for a brief moment and loosening the arrow in my hand as the Goldenheart bow, a gift from Jalabar Co. after witnessing my talent in archery, did all the rest. Once again drawing the bowstring quickly as my first target had barely just dropped to the ground, dead from an arrow through the eye and into the brain. Its kin took off into the woods, but it didn't make it 5 steps before the second arrow I released hit it right behind its left shoulder, piercing its heart. My target tried to move a few more steps before its body finally gave out. In the blink of an eye, I drew my Goldenheart bow one last time and finished a third one that didn't seem to understand what had just happened, putting enough force behind my projectile that it impaled its lifeless body against a nearby tree. 3 bores in mere seconds. Meh, I could have done better, but it's not like I required more meat. Honestly, your skill with a bow is outstanding, Don. You should be the one training the Tarly boy. Tyrion said from behind me while lowering his own crossbow, and Davin nodded at how effortlessly I've made hunting boars appear to be. Why did you even bring us with you? How did you even know they were here? To your question about how I knew of their location, I just followed my instincts. I said with a shrug, incredulous to how oblivious one could be to the animal trails spread throughout the woods, before whistling loud enough for my sand steed to hear and follow. Before we began moving forward through the woods, I added while ignoring the other hogs of the pack running away. As for why I brought you along, you probably needed more horses to carry these pigs, obviously. Davin joked as he patted Tyrion's shoulder, who seemed to find reason in his logic and accepted it as true. Probably because I didn't disprove it either. Instead, I joined in Davin's laughter with a casual chuckle. Unbeknown to them, Sandor watched me with a serious expression before finally sighing and moving on to pick up my prey. Acknowledging my sworn shield's behavior, my eyes subtly darted back to the words above their heads. Tyrion Lannister. Titles: Swashbuckler Rogue, Bard and Monk. Race: Andal. Allegiance: Durrandon Baratheon, Royal Legion, House Lannister. PWR: 20. End: 20. Mob: 25. Int: 32. STL: 27. Def: 25 *, Castle Forged Brigandine, piercing, bludgeoning, slashing plus 50% damage resistance. Davin Lannister of Lannisport. Titles: Champion Fighter, Barbarian and Rogue. Race: Andal. Allegiance: Durrandon Baratheon, Royal Legion, House Lannister of Lannisport. PWR: 28. End: 28. Mob: 30. Int: 29. STL: 24. Def: 40 * Castle Forged Steel Plate Armor, piercing, slashing plus 100% damage resistance, bludgeoning plus 50% damage resistance. Sandor Clegane. Titles: Battlemaster Fighter and Barbarian. Race: Andal. Allegiance: Durrandon Baratheon. PWR: 40. End: 38. Mob: 29. Int: 20. STL: 15. Def: 40 * Castle Forged Steel Plate Armor, piercing, slashing plus 100% damage resistance, bludgeoning plus 50% damage resistance. It was the first time I had taken the time to read in depth their updated status for quite a while now, and I loved how far they have progressed. Especially Tyrion, who has absorbed everything I taught him that I've learned from both Syrio and Jalabar. Dual-wielding his daggers like the freaking Thorfinn from Vinland Saga and matching even the Tarly archers with his crossbow was no small accomplishment for the man fighting to not end up known as the Imper Halfman. Although, if I wasn't here to witness his personal growth, his monk title would have made me wonder if he was going to unlock a trait like the Drunken Master or something related. As for Sandor, his initial physical stats were already high to begin with, so I was more than satisfied with him following my steps and becoming a Battlemaster fighter. Just like my father, the Demon of the Trident, the younger Clegane wasn't as strong as the Mountain nor was he as skilled as Barristan Selmy, but it was a balance between those factors that put them in such an impressive category of fighters. Though, unlike the two Lannisters, he was still lacking his third title. And although Davin hasn't gained the same trait of Battlemaster, even after I made him read countless treaties about the Iron Dance of Westeros, he more than compensated for it by unlocking one completely new named champion. And both the Barbarian and Rogue title gave him the range to deal with pretty much any kind of combat. While Tyrion invested his charisma on his title as a rogue, instead of also becoming a bard, Davin spent all of his and poured it into his title as a fighter. Trait: Champion. The archetypal champion focuses on the development of raw physical power honed to deadly perfection while also inspiring greatness in others by committing brave deeds in battle. Those who model themselves on this archetype combine rigorous training with physical excellence to deal devastating blows. And the mere presence of one in a hamlet is enough to cause some bandits to seek easier prey. For a lone champion is a mighty warrior, but one leading a band of allies can transform even the most poorly equipped militia into a ferocious war band. Rather preferring to lead through deeds, not only words, whenever a champion spearheads an attack, their actions can awaken reserves of courage and conviction in allies that they never suspected they had. It certainly fits his own style as a fighter and probably will be a better match for the son of the Lord of Lannisport, especially since he keeps constantly speaking about how much he planned to improve his family's home, starting with the city's guard. As for the features he got for it. Feature: Royal Envoy. You can intimidate and persuade others much more easily, while also resistant to both frightening and charming effects. Appropriate for someone who needed all the help once his battles became less frequent on the battlefield and more frequent in the Game of Thrones. Feature: Rally Cry. Once in between your short rests, you can bolster the resolve of all of your companions that can see or hear you. Those friendly creatures. Health bar regenerates faster and gains temporary health points equal to twice your title's level. Kinda like my Twilight Sanctuary, if not a little weaker in terms of boosting others' HP, but certainly more suited to be used in open battle. Feature: Inspiring Surge. Once in between your short rests, you can inspire an adrenaline rush on all of your companions that can see or hear you. Those friendly creatures. Mobility stat increases by half and their stamina bar regenerates faster. Now that's what made me desperately want this trait for me as well, for it seems to naturally stack with the mobility bonus it gave to other fighters while they were under the effects of their own action surge. Which made me wonder if my Barbarian title might also have something like it for the other physical stats. Suffice to say that they were absolutely the kind of people I wanted to keep by my side and fight alongside, as well as the type one could trust to accomplish almost any task I gave them. Noticing that I've been silent for too long, I ended my line of thought and turned to face my companions. In all seriousness, I did ask for you to come for another reason. I said, getting serious as Sandor finished tying the boars, corpses and carried one of them towards his large warhorse, comically named Stranger, in order to place the dead hog over its saddle. My sand steed came trotting up, with Davin and Tyrion's horses in tow at the same time. They reached down and lifted the dead pig up and onto the back of their horses. You see, my mount, which I ended up naming Night because of her black color, could still make do with the extra weight, but her true specialty lay in being capable of outrunning any other land animal for far longer periods of time. The Dornishmen love to claim that this breed is able to run for a day and night and another day, and never tire. Besides, she was still just a young mare, the years could still make her grow more fit for the labor. I've brought you to speak about something very important. I finally said, once we reached a faraway spot from our camp, before displaying my magic for them to see with the help of my magical wand, prompting the three men to stare incredulously at what I was displaying for them. Sprouting from the endpoint of my artificer creation, I casted several minor illusions of what appeared to be hovering, small and shining, seven-pointed stars. Casting thaumaturgy, I magnified my voice by up to 5 times while changing it to sound more like a choir of angelic voices, added to the earth tremor strong enough to rattle several trees and bushes. For a long time I've been pondering about the offer I'm about to make to you three. I announced with all the authority my persuasion allowed me to. From a young age I've been chosen, now, I chose you three to join my cause. I could of course have taken the forward approach I've taken with my other agents, but these three were a special case. Parlor tricks alone wouldn't get their attention for enough time, as even the ever so cynical Tywin Lannister was slowly getting used to what I've displayed to him back when we first met. No, for my closest companions, who would carry my banner and led my legion into war, I was required to give them something to believe in. Some bigger cause than simply me commanding them to obey my orders. Like Daenerys inadvertently did with Jorah Mormont as she stepped out of the flames unharmed and with 3 living dragons, I had to remove the cynicism out of them. But since something like that might completely waste all the work I've been doing with filling Sandor's head with what a true knight ought to be, instead of frightening to the point of forcing him to break his vows as my sword shield and walk away, I've kept subtly enforcing the aspects of the faith of the Seven. Spending the mana I had stored inside my magical wand, I casted one of my second-level spells without hesitation. Starbeam, my strongest evocation spell up to this point, was a silvery beam of radiant bright light shone from the starry night sky centered down on me, engulfing in a 3-meter radius all the forest within its light and ghostly flames. Even if my resistance to radiant damage wasn't anything to boast about, thanks to my aptitude with evocation magic, I had no trouble creating a pocket of absolute safety inside the beam of pure light. Taking the opportunity, I walked forward and exited the beam of bright light while in my starry form, bearing the constellation of the dragon while floating thanks to my tempestuous magic, casting down my shadow over my shocked companions. Subtly casting my minor illusion to have the music, Light of the Seven, play in the background, I stacked on top of it my balm of peace, augmenting my presence with divine power. Not satisfied with it, I brought forth one of my latest discoveries in studying enchantment magic. Zone of Truth LV1, 0%. Second-class enchantment spell. You create a magical zone that guards against deception in a 5-meter radius sphere centered on a point of your choice within range. Until the spell ends, a creature that enters the spell's area or starts inside it can't speak a deliberate lie while in the radius. You are immediately informed whenever a creature manages to resist this spell's magical effect. An affected creature is aware of something magical compelling honesty from it and could avoid answering questions to which it would normally respond with a lie. Such a creature can be evasive in its answers as long as it remains within the boundaries of the truth. Casting time. Instantaneous. Range. 20 meters. Components. V and S. Duration. 10 minutes. I knew Davin was fairly religious, not to the level of utmost piety up to this point, but still enough to make him seriously acknowledge the godly imagery I've built for me. And although Sandor was even less pious, even he couldn't deny the messianic miracle before him. As for Tyrion, all he ever wanted was to be truly loved. Eventually becoming just as cynical and jaded as his father, the young Lannister of the books eventually reached the point of seeking to destroy Westeros and murder both of his siblings. Since we've met, I've made sure to make him realize how much I respected him and believed in his potential. I've made sure that none dared disrespect him either to his face or to his back. I was the exact opposite of what Joffrey would have been to him, sharing wise advice in a friendly manner and occasionally playing some Syvass's matches just to strengthen our bond. Not only that, but from what I've heard, I even got Tywin Lannister to actually compliment his progress. Nothing outstanding, since neither would ever forget the entire incident with Tysha, but at least I didn't need to constantly worry that he would be pushed to the point of breaking bad. Nephew, what is this power? Is this really magic? And what is this cause you speak of? Tyrion was the first to speak up, probably as a defensive mechanism he had for himself, with both Davin and Sandor still having their jaws dropped in utter shock. I've been blessed by the light of the seven. I replied with my voice still carrying great magical power behind it, and as I dismissed my starbeam, my identities of knight, bard, monk and rogue were left standing behind me. Their expression was a testament to the importance of my words. I've been burdened with a glorious purpose. To Sandor's credit, he was the second one to recover once he saw Knight, the man he considered as his rival. Purpose. I smiled. Look around, Clegane. Septons and knights preaching about holiness while lying, murdering, stealing and raping. The gods have sworn to not personally intervene so as not to provoke the other self-proclaimed gods, but as other supernatural threats rise again, they finally decide to select a champion. One born with the magic blood of the dragons and the immortal soul of the Storm Kings. All four of my false identities bowed behind me, declaring their full support to my words while I ceremoniously shot upward my guiding bolt, out of my holy symbol, similar to how Green Lanterns so oftenly did. You, my prince. Davin finally recovered from his shock, as the earth tremor gave way to another strong gust of wind blowing past the woods. Precisely. I nodded, my eyes now beginning to shine with their respective colors. As you can attest by the power I now wield before you. You spoke of supernatural threats. Tyrion inquired, still struggling to believe everything he was witnessing. Indeed. I raised my starry hand again. Beside him, a frozen skeleton figure stepped forward with its usual undead movements. Before Tyrion could run away in fear instead of reaching for his dagger, I spoke again. The dead will rise from the lands of always winter, bringing with them the long night of legends. I turned to Sandor, and as he winced, we all heard screeching noises and sounds of flapping wings. The word in everyone's mind at that moment was what allowed the Targaryens to conquer an entire continent. Followed by the imagery of all the people crucified by Daenerys. Dragons will hatch from their once believed dead eggs, serving a Targaryen queen that lays waste to armies on Essos as she seeks to find her way back to Westeros. Suddenly every unnatural phenomenon halted and silence dawned between all of us. And there's more, much more. The three men stared at each other for a brief moment, probably attempting to figure out if they were actually dreaming about everything, before turning their gaze towards me. Their expression confirmed that they were finally digesting everything I told them. Kneel before me. Swear in the name of the seven gods your undying loyalty to me and I will continue to extend my blessings over you. I told them, signaling for my fake identities to stand by my side. Continue. Tyrion questioned, watching the serious face from even the usually always so easygoing bard. Oh please, don't tell me you haven't felt the unnatural evolution you have all gone through after meeting me. I replied back, toning down the tense atmosphere brought by my starry form. Not only are you all capable of quickly recovering after intense training, but are also growing stronger, faster and more sharp at a prodigious pace. Tyrion and Davin began showing signs of finally acknowledging getting everything they have accomplished in less than a year, while Sandor had a face of, I knew something was going on. And in time, with more diligent training and proper experience, you will all become legendary skilled individuals in whichever path you take. I concluded, still impressed by how smoothly I was managing to explain things to them. Now, I grant you the opportunity of swearing your lives and help me not only to save the world as we know from the chaos that is on its way, but also make it evolve into something so much better. Be aware that this is not the sort of vow that most knights and septons break without consequences. If you do not have what it takes to follow me even to the deepest of the seven hells, the friendship and respect between us will remain as it is, but I will have to take back my blessing. It was in all honesty an empty vow. They were already being judged by how my system perceived their loyalty, but they didn't know about that, nor they needed to. And I still wanted to hear from them while under the effects of my zone of truth. I couldn't just change their nature and bend their will, yet, but I was certainly capable of being unbelievably eloquent. And to my satisfaction, I watched my three companions kneeling before me with their expressions betraying no hesitation. Henceforth, you three are part of my inner circle of companions. You will serve only me, Durandon Stormborn of House Baratheon, first of his name, blood of old Valyria and the gods of wind and sea, blessed by the seven, future emperor of the Andals, first men, Rhoynar and all of Planetos. While omitting for now the truce with the old gods, I watched through my observe skill as their allegiance changed to have my name as a priority. Approach, Sir Sandor Clegane. I commanded and he immediately obeyed. As the only knight of this group, I will make you my first blessed warrior. The hound furrowed his eyebrow in confusion, but remained silent as I chanted before him, mimicking the act of knighting someone that my father did on me while disguised as knight. The path of vengeance is a solemn commitment to punish those who have committed a grievous sin. Sandor's eyes betrayed that he immediately thought about his brother, the mountain that rides. When evil forces slaughter helpless villagers, when someone turns against the will of the gods, when a group of bandits grows too violent and powerful, when a wild beast rampages through the countryside, at times like these, paladins like you will set right that which has gone wrong. To the paladins to follow this path, who are also called avengers or dark knights, their own purity is not as important as delivering justice. Sandor nodded in complete devotion. The tenets of your creed will revolve around punishing wrongdoers by any means necessary. Those who uphold these tenets are willing to sacrifice even their own righteousness to mete out justice upon those who do evil. The core principles of the tenets are brutally simple. I raised one finger while casting a minor illusion to better illustrate my point. Fight the greater evil. Faced with a choice of fighting my sworn foes or combating a lesser evil, I will choose the greater evil. Sandor replied as if he had recited those same words for his entire life. No mercy for the wicked. I raised another finger while suppressing a grin. Ordinary foes might win my mercy, but my sworn enemies do not. Sandor replied again. By any means necessary. I raised a third finger. My qualms can't get in the way of exterminating my foes. He continued. Restitution. I raised a fourth and final finger. If my foes wreak ruin on the world, it is because I failed to stop them. I must help those harmed by their misdeeds. The hound concluded before carving his long sword in the ground before him. I placed my hand over his shoulder and watched as his stats finally displayed a magical capacity through the use of his divine points. It wasn't anywhere near as large or as versatile as my mana bar was since he relied on drawing from divine energies, nor did he possess the same level of control as I did since he would require meditating and praying, but it will be more than sufficient for now. Sandor could not only smite his enemies, but also call upon the same features as I did, like Vow of Enmity. Not to mention his propensity with scaring most people would be weaponized thanks to Abjure Enemy. In time, he might even unlock similar features as I did, like Divine Sense and Lay on Hands. But that's a bridge we will cross later. He was still a low-level paladin. Thinking more about it, I pushed my luck with the stranger and also made Sandor a cleric, granting him the Twilight Domain. Remember that the Twilight transition from light into darkness often brings calm and even joy, as the day's labors end and the hours of rest begin. The darkness can also bring terrors, but you will be responsible to guard against those horrors of the night and bring comfort to those who seek rest, protecting them by venturing into the encroaching darkness to ensure that the dark is a comfort, not a terror. My sworn shield remained silent, accepting his role as my dark knight while showing no signs of objection to my words and thus unlocking the ability to bring forth the same twilight sanctuary that I had. Rise, my avenger, guardian of the night. I said before turning my gaze towards Tyrion and Davin, noticing their expecting looks. Worry not, my friends. Clegane here will serve both as a tryout to how far my followers can progress and as an example to follow. I told them, you will have plenty of time to prove your value in the war that is to come. War, my prince? Davin questioned. What war are you referring to, Dawn? Tyrion joined, still not comfortable in speaking casually with me while in my starry form. Why do you think I've worked so hard in raising my royal legion in such a short amount of time? I argued back. The Ironborn will soon rebel, but I assure you, we will be ready. I allowed the silence to dwell between us for a brief moment, expecting that out of anyone in the continent, these three Westerlanders would know to take the threat of the Ironborn seriously. While they were busy with their own thoughts, I kept hoping that anyone in the distance that wasn't distracted and saw my starbeam and guiding bolt would just assume they were merely shooting stars. Oh, and that the stranger would understand my reasoning for naming Sandor as his paladin and cleric. Before I could follow up my comment about war with any announcement, I was struck by another one of my portent visions. It was me. Although I couldn't make much of my appearance, I could definitely see that I was much taller than the average man. Looking beyond that, I noticed that I was being shielded on both sides by what appeared to be the definition of holy knights, two angelic paladins that sprouted feathered wings while emanating a powerful aura. The one standing on my right was also blurred out to me, though it was clear that the figure clearly embodied the theme of a white knight, and the one on my left, a dark knight, wearing a masterfully crafted helm that alluded to the image of a snarling hound, Sandor. As the vision ended and I found myself back to the present, immediately noticing that my companions were getting a little uneased by my prolonged silence. Wow, that must have been the farthest away that I've glimpsed into the future. I thought to myself, really satisfied with the implications of what I just witnessed, before dismissing it and finally announcing. It's time for your initiation. And so, I led them back to our camp while recalling every vivid detail of my foretelling in silence. Red Keep, Riverland, Castle Rock and Highgarden. I've unlocked 4 out of the 9 great houses' magical dungeons. Before Ashford, I've managed to clear 9, and if not for my current company it would have been very inconsequential to me. The undeads that were spawned here weren't of a particularly high level, nor were the traps that vicious. With the only significant difference being that the higher demographic of the Reach reflected in similar fashion with the hordes of undead found in each magical dungeon. Though to the detriment of their quality, which was a perfect tutorial for my 3 champions. So this is how you've always had something up your sleeve. Tyrion grinned, finally understanding as he got used to his limited version of my inventory. His dagger disappeared from one hand to another as if he already knew magic. Indeed, I admitted, leading them inside the magical dungeon. Also, your eyes can better perceive the world that surrounds you. So that's why I've been getting some extra pieces of trivia in my mind while inspecting the Royal Legion's equipment and provisions. Davin remarked, relieved. Won't we all be missed by the troops if we stay away for too long? Since I gave them a rest from marching throughout the Reach, staying until the end of the tournament Lord Ashford is hosting will certainly be a welcome change of pace for them. I've also had Satin and Pia being hosted safely at the castle and keeping an eye on Sam. I informed them before sweetening the deal with a half-truth. Besides, I also have all those foreigners from far, far away keeping watch of everything. You mind explaining again what is this initiation you've mentioned? Tyrion asked while Sandor discovered the usefulness of equipping and unequipping his armor. Hey, I no longer need those annoying squires. Clegane grinned. Like I said, I've brought you here to give you a taste of what is to come. I mentioned while pointing ahead, as a horde of undead began striding towards us. Sandor, you are the front-line heavy hitter, shield your allies and smite your foes. Davin, you are the close quarters beat down, cut through anything that is fast enough to flank Clegane. And Tyrion, you are the long-distance beat down, cover your allies and exploit their weaknesses with your crossbow. They followed my instructions and steeled themselves to face the approaching zombies. What about you, nephew? Tyrion asked, slightly concerned that I might be exposed to danger. As the first wave of zombies was about to clash against them, I immediately twinned my mage armor spell so as to cover us all. They soon noticed how the cloak of shining runes was capable of deflecting a barrage of projectiles. The archer monsters shot at them, without even scratching their armors. I'll play the role of support, I said, quickly touching the swords in Sandor and Davin's hands and coating them with radiant energy and utility. You enchanted my sword, Sandor muttered to himself, still unable to ignore my magical stunts. I mean, of course you did. These hideous creatures are beings of darkness. The light of the 7 will burn them like dragonfire. I replied before facing Tyrion. Can you shoot while riding? Tyrion furrowed his eyebrows for a brief moment before replying. I think so. But we left our mounts behind. Where will you find a? Interrupting him mid-sentence, I summoned my wild companion, Shadow, in her magical form while disguising it as a shadow cat. Fucking monster. Clegane almost barked before cleaving a regular zombie in half. I feel great. Davin smiled before bashing another one with his shield, pushing it against the nearby wall before decapitating it. A shadow cat, Tyrion muttered. If it's a problem for you, next time you should try to bring your Leons from Castle Rock. I recommend it to him. Hey, perhaps one day, Tyrion merely snickered and mounted my familiar. Her intelligence allowed him to shoot without having to worry about riding his mount around. What came next was the thrill and entertainment I've been longing for in quite a while now. Without having to constantly dish out spells or rely too much on my Valyrian steel weapons, the combat between my party and the horde of undeads was actually challenging. Though my emboldening bond feature as a peace cleric made sure that we weren't taking any unnecessary risk. Clegane, curse that big one. I commanded as the rare specimen of a tall undead clad in full plate armor came into sight, reminding me of my death knight. May your cunt creator have mercy on you, for I will not. Sandor shouted and his class feature immediately took effect. He didn't wait for my command to begin hacking and slashing at the toughest undead after it was debuffed. 2 spear-wielding zombies rushed forward and aimed to skewer the hound, probably forgetting how strong my abjuration magic was. Davin parried one thrust with his shield before leveraging it to provoke an opening by lowering the spear and instantly decapitating the same foe. Meanwhile, the other spear-wielding undead dropped its weapon and fell down, displaying one of its eye sockets with a crossbow bolt embedded in it. Nice work. I complimented the 3 as Sandor finally grappled the big one. Once it lost its steel helmet he finally headbutted it, smashing the undead's head into a pulpy mess. Tyrion suddenly chuckled as Shadow halted its movement right behind me. I know this is supposed to be terrifying, but I'm actually having fun. This is meant to serve as a training session for what is to come. I humbled his growing confidence. Their numbers will be much larger and the others will be leading them with their ice magic. I'll take my chances with them, instead of those fire-breathing fuckers. Sandor argued before throwing the lifeless body of the big undead he had just thrashed. Exhaling, Davin corrected the hound's previous statement about dragons. What? Sandor questioned after instantly removing his helmet and wiping the sweat out of his forehead. You see, dragons are said to exhale fire. Davin continued while turning to me and Tyrion, completely unaware of Sandor staring daggers at him. Oh, perhaps they actually just spit fire. Tyrion joined in Davin's argument, though the little Lannister was completely aware of Clegane's clenching jaw. Can't say I'm eager to fight one, but the idea of sighting the creatures long thought extinct is definitely appealing. HMPF. Clegane grunted and decided to ignore the two Lannisters. If you are all recovered, let's proceed. You three still need to rest before we continue traveling tomorrow. I interrupted their discussion about dragons and mythical creatures. Understood. The three of them replied together. I wasn't expecting them to grow used to everything so quickly, but I obviously wasn't going to complain about it. As utility and support, I made sure to bring new tools and capabilities to my party while also sharpening and honing the ones they already had with them. Gotta say, even though I wasn't expecting it, the three companions were basically steamrolling everything in their path. A pity this pocket dimension didn't have anything special like a undead mage, undead shadows, fiendish hags or even the blights I fought both in Highgarden and in the Arbor. By the point the sun was about to rise outside, my party had all but cleared the magical dungeon under Ashford, leaving only the last wave for them to face without my help or intervention. Remembering to feed my mimic pet from time to time and to finally have a talk with my wild companion, I still had the time to stroll around the dungeon without worry or care. Even the baby slime I got after facing several athcoids was finally showing signs of being open for domestication once I fed it frequently enough. Unlike Gobble, my mimic pet, the little slime didn't seem to mind digesting bits of undead flesh or plants, but neither were into inorganic material such as rocks and metals. In case things inexplicably went south, I still had my spare the dying as a backup plan. Thankfully, that ended up not being the case. Leading them past the treasure room after I placed my arcane lock there, I left the spoils in gold for them to make use in whichever way they saw fit. I must say, finding a treasure chest wasn't amongst the things I had anticipated. Tyrion admitted while taking his share of the loot. Just don't waste all of it away with whores and alcoholic beverages. I remarked while making sure I've unlocked another castle. Hey, I would never, Tyrion began apologizing, but I interrupted him again. You three are champions of the seven, not to what the average cleric preaches about. Promiscuity and drinking are still sins, but in healthy doses they should never be mistaken as crimes. I told them, only your loyalty towards me has no space for tolerance. Betray me or those that follow me and we are done. We understand. Davin spoke up after storing his share. I will be bringing lots of improvements to Lannisport. Our travels have provided some excellent ideas that I'm sure my father will appreciate. Great, can we go now? I'm hungry. Sandor shrugged, not much interest in using the money for anything other than food, and perhaps improving his equipment. Here, I got roasted chicken with potatoes. I told him and immediately noticed his eyes shining with excitement. I should have known that my chef perk was bound to be more useful as I increased the number of my close associates. Nephew, I mean, Don. Tyrion approached right after I handed some meals to both Davin and Sandor. Would you mind telling me more about this magic of yours? I could see from his posture that it was something he had been postponing to ask me. Not at all, uncle. I smiled back, storing away my magical wand and retrieving a few of my magical scrolls. I've been meaning to have that conversation with someone other than Monk. Monk? Tyrion asked while furrowing his eyebrows before finally understanding. Oh, who would have guessed that the man with Valyrian traits was after all a hedge wizard? I wouldn't call him that. I shrugged humorously while handing him some of the less dangerous magic scrolls. Especially to his face. Hey, I will make sure to keep that in mind. Tyrion remarked while unrolling the first scroll. Am I supposed to make heads or tails of any of this? Eventually, it's easier than to have you dedicate all of your spare time trying to memorize all the theoretical and practical aspects of magic. I told him, preparing to activate the magic in parchment, wasting a few hours of work in preparing a spell I could already cast without spending mana. Disguise self. As the myriad of arcane writings gave out a magical flash, leading to everything that I've scribed with my wizardry quill to disappear and the spell took effect. As Tyrion stepped back, shocked once again by my display of magic, his image was immediately changed to look as if he was a man around 6 feet tall. No longer appearing to be a dwarf with stunted legs, stubby fingers and a jutting forehead. His mismatched eyes of green and black were now both Lannister-like emeralds, and his thin mismatched hair gave space to one curled with the color of beaten gold. Regardless of such stark transformation, due to his facial features, anyone that knew him well could recognize Tyrion even in this. "Why you've turned me into my brother Jaime?" Tyrion asked, staring down at his arms and legs before moving to inspect his face. "Nonsense, uncle," I told him, drawing the attention of both Davin and Sandor, who stopped stuffing their faces and gobbling down the roasted chicken I gave them. "You are still you, just a little taller." "Wow, Lord Tyrion, you are taller than me now," Davin remarked, really impressed by what he was seeing. "But how's that possible?" Clegane asked, still towering over my uncle. "Technically, it's just an illusion. Although you can interact with the world around you as if you were of that shape and size, this form of yours isn't fit, much less durable enough for combat." I warned him, explaining the basics of what I've managed to accomplish through leveling up this skill. "I would say that you can go back and forth on that appearance for an entire day before the spell's effect wears off." I changed him back to his regular dwarf size and noticed his disappointment. But since I was the one to activate the scroll, that decision falls over to me. Allowing my uncle to enjoy the feeling of being tall once again, I turned to face Sandor while retrieving another magic scroll from my inventory. "While Tyrion's case can't be changed for much longer than a day on each casting of my magic, I believe yours can be permanently dealt with." Sandor raised an eyebrow at my remark, taking a few seconds to understand what I was implying. Visibly staggering once he got the idea of what I was referring to, he finally spoke while placing a hand over the burned half of his face he so frequently hid with his long dark hair. "You mean, you can get rid of it? Make me handsome or something?" "I'm not one to say if you would be handsome or not," I casually stated, not expecting this vain side of my Sunere hound. "But I can probably help you with the burning scars." "If that's the case, how much will it cost?" Sandor replied, immediately moving to retrieve the loot he just got from the dungeon before I stopped him. "Nothing at all. Consider this a gift from a friend," I told him, hammering down the prospect of us being more than professional associates. I don't know what to say, Don," Sandor said before kneeling once again before me. Restoration LV 10, 23%. Second class abjuration spell. You touch a creature to instantly heal 50 health points and recover it from exhaustion. Any scars this spell is focused on will be healed to the point of not appearing anymore. On top of that, you can also cure one disease, neutralize one poison, or end one condition afflicting it. That condition can be either blinded, deafened, muted, or paralyzed. Casting time, instantaneous. Range, touch, components, V&S. Duration, instantaneous. As I activated my second-class magical scroll on him, I realized once again how much easier it was for me and Paige to level up spells around this class thanks to the intermediate arcane knowledge I got from the dungeon under the citadel. Soon enough, the other side of Sandor's face, the one that was a burned ruin of scars, began to heal as my sworn shield was covered in a bright magical aura. No longer he had slick black flesh, pocked with craters and deep cracks that oozed red and wet. His ear wasn't only a hole now, with a stump quickly growing into a regular ear, and the hint of bone showed on his jaw was completely covered by all the layers of facial muscles and skin. The scars that extended down to his throat also faded out. And so did the twisted mass of scars around his eye, which was still good, not harmed by the fire, and the lips on that side of face showed themselves once again. For all intents and purposes, Sandor Clegane was a new man. Not exactly the impossibly good-looking man that Jaime Lannister was known to be, but still very much what most maidens dreamed of. "Oh my," I said, staring at my tall and dark avenger while retrieving a small mirror from my inventory. Clegane quickly picked it up and couldn't fathom what he was witnessing. Even running his fingers down his cheek wasn't enough to make him believe it wasn't all a dream. I am normal," he finally muttered to himself, before bowing down once again, immediately correcting his previous slip-up on his normal behavior. "Thank you. You are most welcome, my friend," I told him while signaling for him to stand with a pat on his back. "I just ask for a little bit of discretion from you. As I'm sure you can understand, the world we live in ain't accustomed to the prospect of magic being used to do good." Makes sense, I guess." Sandor nodded, immediately equipping his infamous helm that displayed the vivid image of a snarling hound. But unbeknown to everyone, I could tell that my sworn shield was grinning like never before. Let's see, Tyrion was having a taste of one of his most desperate dreams, and Sandor took the first step to lose his fear of fire. "I would be careful with those weapons if I were you three. Their magical power will take quite some time before running out. Especially if you keep them stored in your inventories." Before Davin could even think about asking me anything, I reminded them. The heir of Lannisport immediately understood that what he had in hand was the closest he had come of wielding a Valyrian steel weapon, and from his expression it was a glorious feeling. Just wait until I craft you some armor infused with magic. Oh, here, store these flasks for any emergency. Red is for healing wounds like bleeding and broken bones, green is for boosting your speed, and yellow is for fortifying your bodies for a brief moment. Handing them a handful of the elixirs that I've brewed up to this point, I informed them while wondering how long it would take for me to crack the code of putting spells into my elixirs. Although the process of brewing potions was a little different in terms of production cost when compared to scribing scrolls, it came with the benefit of being effective regardless of the consumer's knowledge about magic, though with the detriment of perishing like most consumables usually did. After a couple of weeks of non-stop travel to cross into the region of the Riverlands without having to go closer to King's Landing, since I knew I would be forced to wait until my father throwed another tournament to celebrate my next name day, finally in the distance I could see the two castles of the twins. One on each side of the river, and the stone bridge that passed between them displaying the pride of the Freys. This was the only crossing for hundreds of miles in the kingdom of the Riverlands. If we were traveling to the north, passing close to Riverrun just like we just did, we would be faced with just two options. Cross here, paying the toll set by the Freys, or travel perhaps an extra 500 kilometers down to the Ruby Ford and back up the King's Road passing by the capital. Even coming down from the north was no better, as Robb Stark had learned during his war against the Iron Throne. And make no mistake, the Freys knew about this, and the toll they charged was high due to it. For peasants and traders, I doubt they asked more than the other option was worth. However, when the opportunity arises for a heftier sum, such as when Robb needed to bring his army south, a larger toll would be exacted. This toll would be less of an exact sum, rather whatever Lord Frey decided he wanted. He could have asked Robb for coin, as a normal toll would, but instead he asked for a betrothal. For that reason, the history of the twins was really the history of one family, House Frey. By Westeros standards they were actually quite a young house, but still twice as old as the Baratheons were. Around 600 years ago they were granted this land for reasons that appear to be lost to history, but it is known that the first Lord Frey set his mind immediately into trying to build a bridge across the Green Fork. There's a reason why no one had done this before, and it's because the Green Fork was a wide and swift-flowing river. Because of that, it took the Freys 3 generations to build that bridge, and even then it was a humble thing made from wood. But the Freys were nothing if not persistent and willing to plan for the long term. They built wooden castles on both shores of the river to guard the bridge, and started charging people to cross it. Over several more generations they upgraded both castles and the bridge to stone. The castles became some of the strongest in the Seven Kingdoms, and the ever-increasing toll revenue made the Freys one of the richest families. They were now one of the most powerful bannermen of House Tully, comparable even to the Brackens and Blackwoods whom we paid a brief stop on our way here. But they were not loved, or even respected, by most noble families or the small folk. Instead, they were viewed as upstarts and money grabbers. And as my retinue and I approached, I was reminded that I too was expected to pay the toll to make use of their bridge. For soon enough some Frey outriders met us, expecting to know our business, until one of them recognized me and my banner. Otho, Frey Knight, LB, 21. Race, Andal, PWR, 22. End, 23. Mob, 24. Int, 15. STL, 13. Def, 20 * Castle Forged Steel Riveted Mail Armor. Piercing, slashing plus 50% damage resistance, bludgeoning plus 25% damage resistance. My prince, Lord Frey wasn't expecting your visit. One of the Frey soldiers announced, before he and 2 other soldiers immediately dismounted their horses and bowed in respect. I hope that isn't a problem, Sir Otho. I replied, motioning for them to stand up and startling the man because I knew his name. I've sent some of my legionnaires to patrol the Riverlands, but was a little surprised at hearing that they haven't been allowed to take shelter in your lord's castle or even set camp on his lands. Aye, my prince, the knight of House Frey was at a loss for words as his embarrassment and fear under the stare of my group of men. Do not worry, Sir Otho, to talk this through is precisely the reason of my visit. I calmed him. Would you kindly lead us inside the twins so I may properly negotiate with Lord Frey? The man immediately nodded and quickly mounted back his horse, leading us and the other Frey outriders. On our way, another party joined us. It was Sir Cleos Frey, son of Jenna, followed by the strong Sir Hosteen Frey and the agile Sir Walder Rivers. That prompted me to recall having sent my personal raven a week ago summoning them in order to settle this matter with Lord Walder Frey once and for all. The bird was a white raven I came to call Light, mostly due to how she and Shadow weren't that friendly to one another. White ravens were a species of bird rarer than black ravens, not regarded as albino, but a separate species altogether. This is known because they were larger and more intelligent than their black counterparts, said to grow bigger than hawks. And just like black ravens, white ravens could croak words in the common tongue. But the best thing with Light was that she could also speak a little of true tongue. Usually all were reared at the citadel in Alttown. But as the crown prince I got away with a small favor with the maesters. Which sounds more complicated than it was, but even with their newfound high demand once the seasons became shorter. For white ravens of the citadel did not carry messages, as their dark cousins did. When they went forth from Alttown, it was for one purpose only, to herald a change of seasons. Back to my present. The 3 Frey knights of before were leading a group of legionnaires, with Hoster Tully, the Blackfish, acting as their officer in command and Bronn as the second in command. It's good to see you all. I greeted them while riding Knight, my sand steed. Especially in one piece. I, my prince, likewise for you and your men. Cleos bowed his head while still riding his mount, followed by everyone else. Although it wasn't for a lack of danger in the past few months. The bastard of Walder Frey remarked with his usual cocky attitude. Nothing we couldn't handle, of course. Hosteen added, displaying without shame a new scar across his nose. I'm pleased to hear it. I replied while signaling them to continue following us, as our groups of legionnaires began marching in line. And what about you Blackfish? Have the new recruits been meeting your expectations? I certainly would not have spent my time training and leading them otherwise, my prince. He replied with a semblance of a grin. The sellsword has been quite useful in weed out the talentless and useless. Is that so? I raised an eyebrow and looked at Bronn with a small grin. Guess the salary has been quite the incentive. The payment doesn't cover for all the work and trouble I've been having to deal with. Bronn casually argued. But I would be a fucking liar if I said that I could find anything better. Some of these fuckers would ruin the sellsword line of job for me if they ever got tired of playing soldiers. I wasn't expecting such high praise, especially from you. I remarked with a chuckle. It's not that absurd given how many have been rejected. Bronn argued back. Armies don't usually have the benefit of prioritizing quality over quantity. Indeed, the Blackfish agreed. But it also means we might never have the same numbers that most forces have. It's known that despite their much smaller numbers, the Unsullied have bested the Dothraki more than enough times for anyone to claim luck. Our priority must always be to have a solid foundation. I told them. Besides your work here in the Riverlands and my granduncles', Tygot and Garyon, management of the Westerlands, I've just recently added Lord Tarley and his commanding skills to my Royal Legion. Not to mention more influence in the Kingdom of the Reach as a whole and a recruiting post set on Horn Hill. So that's why you've summoned us here, my prince. Cleos finally realized, surprising me by his quick thinking. You want to officially set the twins as one of your Royal Legion's headquarters. But isn't Riverrun a more appropriate place to do such a thing? The Blackfish questioned, drawing a small reaction from the 3 Freys, who unbeknown to me grew a bond of respect. I meant no disrespect, of course. As the Freys seemed more familiarized with Blackfish's manners and made no mention of it, I answered Bryndon's question. Well, I've been avoiding delving my legion into unnecessary political drama. Lannisport instead of Castle Rock and Hornhill instead of Highgarden were clear signs of it. So it not only stands to reason that Riverrun would not be what I'm looking for, besides, the castle of the Freys has a more advantageous position in comparison to the other houses. If you put it that way, the Blackfish said with some reservations in his tone. Besides, I assumed you would prefer to not have to constantly deal with your brother on a daily basis, which would be bound to happen with a garrison of recruitment so close to your family's castle. I persuaded him. Ah, I can see it now. Hey, Bryndon Tully chuckled awkwardly. Good call, my prince. Sorry to have doubted you. I nodded and ended our brief conversation, for the approach to the twins was relatively pleasant, passing through apple orchards and a cornfield. From what I managed to observe, the towers at either end of the bridge were identical. Moats have been dug around them, so they appeared to rise up out of the river with high curtain walls. This might seem to isolate them and leave them vulnerable to a siege, but to do so one would need to besiege both sides of the river, which was more easily planned than done. Each end of the bridge was formidable, with a drawbridge, portcullis and a barbican. Suffice to say that they were both very defensible, probably due to access to the bridge being from the tower itself. To get to it, one must pass through all of the defensive structures that the twins had to offer. But this wasn't just a pedestrian crossing, as 2 wagons could cross the bridge side by side or a whole army in a day. And in the middle of the low-arched bridge was the water tower, rising lonely equidistant between the twins. It was built for 2 purposes, to house honored guests for the night and also to guard the bridge itself. What I found most interesting about it was that my mental map and detect magic cantrip informed me that the entrance to the magical dungeon of this castle was located somewhere in here. While traversing the bridge, I retrieved a forked twig from my inventory and subtly casted my highest divination magic up to this point. -10 megapixels. Dowsing LV5, 78%. Second class divination spell. Picture an object that is familiar to you. You sense the direction to the object's location, as long as that object is within 300 meters of you. If the object is in motion, you know the direction of its movement. The spell can locate a specific object known to you, as long as you have seen it up close, within 10 meters, at least. Once. Alternatively, the spell can locate the nearest object of a particular kind, such as a certain kind of apparel, jewelry, furniture, tool, or weapon. Casting time. Instantaneous. Range. Self. Components. V, S and M, A forked twig. Duration. Concentration, up to 10 minutes. Thinking about anything I could find of interest in here, I located several things stacked together. Well, wouldn't you know, the phrase indeed have a vault filled with gold, silver and jewelry here in this uncommon castle. The lack of Valyrian steel in the vicinity was more than expected though. A shame I was running on such a tight schedule with my 7th name day almost here and the prospect of the next winter threatening to end any window of time I had to visit the Iron Islands in order to make any allies. Having said that, should anyone get this far on the Fry's Bridge, they would be welcomed by another portcullis blocking their way, a hail of arrows from the water tower and boiling oil from the murder holes above. I will be frank, this place did not pretend to be a welcoming place, with even those who were welcome here were expected to pay for the privilege. And inside the eastern end of the bridge, I noticed there were some differences. The Great Hall of Lord Frey was on the eastern segment of the castle, and it was not hard, when one was here most likely begging the leave of the Lord of the Twins, to understand the antipathy of the other noble houses. Since this was built like a throne room, with a great oak-hewn throne-like chair for the man who styles himself as the Lord of the Crossing. Its back was shaped like the twins themselves, 2 towers carved at either end beside an arching bridge. With the hall it was located in being 2 stories high, with a gallery high above the guests, built for musicians no doubt. Or onlookers, sometimes even armed with crossbows as most would have learned during the infamous Red Wedding event. "Why have you come, my prince?" suddenly asked Lord Walder Frey as soon as I found myself standing before him, not openly insulting the crown prince, but neither bowing down in respect like some of his soldiers were doing. Although my royal legion still had plenty of room to grow, it was nice to have our reputation linked together. "It is a great pleasure to meet you, Lord Frey," I answered him with the courtesy he neither deserved nor offered to me. "And I'm quite grateful for your hospitality in having us in your impressive fortress." I smiled at some of his daughters that were in attendance, gaining some chuckles and blushes in return. Most of them weren't that ugly, I mentally remarked. A little too arrogant looking, but nothing I haven't witnessed while visiting other noble families. Indeed, Walder got comfortable in his chair and enjoyed the sweet words I was telling him, not noticing my charismatic influence already starting to take effect on him. "Even though I've had kings as my guests before, you are the first prince to come. A very precocious child from what I've heard, merely one that is very eager to make things happen," I told him without openly antagonizing him. Though to be fair, I've heard that my main concern should be to not die young as a result. Wise advice, I would say. Walder grinned, probably having thought about it himself. "But I do see some similarities between us. Of course, not counting your abnormal hair and eyes, and height. Aren't you supposed to still be far from your 10th name day? Gods, you really are an abnormal lad." While some of his children gasped and my followers grasped their weapons waiting for my command to punish the shameless lord, I smiled. What a joke. We were a stark contrast to each other. I was a very healthy 6, soon to be 7, years old crown prince who was currently building his army. He on the other side, was a infirm 82 years old small lord, who has hid his entire life inside this castle. Even for modern world society, his age was uncommon. Just imagine, for this time and place, how much it speaks of his cowardice and lateness for battle. Even his children were eager to get rid of him, the only thing stopping any drastic action being the chaos resulting from deciding who should rule the twins next. I certainly supported his second son, Aemon Frey, since he has married Jenna Lannister and was father to Cleos Frey. But that still left me to find a way of getting rid of his firstborn, Stevron, and his immediate heirs. "Oh, grandfather, you forget yourself," Cleos spoke, trying to be useful in diffusing the situation. "Prince Durandon." "Who spoke to you?" "The prince is talking to the lord of this castle," interrupted Lord Frey, immediately shutting Cleos. "Until I die, I'm still lord of this castle. Do I look dead to you?" Before Hostine or Walder Rivers attempted to support the one they picked to one day lead House Frey, I raised my hand and shut them all before they could make things worse. Where are my manners? I said, faking humbleness as if I wasn't bothered by his words. Walder Frey certainly didn't seem to care either way. You've asked why I've come and here I am bothering you with discussions about me. Walder Frey raised an eyebrow at my antics. You see, I've come to propose a deal to you, Lord Frey. I finally revealed. The Royal Legion would like to establish a recruitment post here in your castle. Recruitment post? Here. And what do I have to gain from this deal? Walder Frey dared to ask unceremoniously. Other than the immediate protection from the veteran legionaries stationed here. I'll be sure to have your house provided with the necessary supplies to endure the winters and the adequate agricultural work to fill your table during the rest of the year. Food. Is that all I gain from residing your soldiers inside my castle? Lord Frey questioned with a serious expression, but I could see he wasn't that stupid to actually not know how valuable it was since the winters have become harder and more frequent in the entire world. I'm afraid that's all I can directly offer you. I made a sorry expression. But indirectly, I'm sure your own soldiers will have much to gain from training alongside my Royal Legionnaires. Besides, since it's my Legionnaires' responsibility to keep the peace and order of the Riverlands, I'm confident that merchants of other regions even outside of Westeros will be much more confident to venture inland and probably be more frequently inclined to pay the toll to cross your bridge, in order to have access to the rest of the continent. That's it. This deal was much better than anything he could have hoped for. The only thing that remained was for him to accept it. But in the case he was dumb enough to decline, I could just have to simply start building a new bridge myself. Besides, I wasn't expecting Lord Walder to live as long as he did in the books, so the one that ruled after him might have a better head over his shoulders and accept my terms. What do you say, Lord Frey? I brought him out of his thinking. Will that suffice? Walder Frey eventually nodded his head, unwilling to vocally accept defeat in bargaining with a child. Splendid, your water tower will serve as a perfect garrison post. I announced before my men began cheering in celebration. After some renovation, of course. Walder has always been irascible, sharp of tongue and blunt of manner, his age has only served to increase it. In a way, he reminded me of the Queen of Thorns. Which was funny, since I've sought to preserve her health, but I'm actually considering murdering the Weasel Lord myself. Walder Frey also viewed himself as another Tywin Lannister, but it seems that I've outplayed him as well. Never understood why this old fart never changed his throne room to the water tower, since it was not only closer to both ends of his bridge, but also built to repel advances from both sides. Sucks to be him, I guess, because the twins are as good as mine. But I won't have the time to explore it further than I already had during my arrival, since this was not somewhere I wished to stay longer than I must, so I informed my retinue that we will keep traveling. Our next stop would be somewhere just as strategically positioned, in my opinion. Seaguard, seat of House Mallister. On my way out of the twins after sharing some pleasantries with the Freys I still had some interest in, I took the opportunity to officially station Bryden Tully and Bronn there to aid Cleos and the other Freys dedicated to serving my Royal Legion from the water tower. At the same time, finding it the perfect opportunity to sneakily add Cleos Frey into my party of companions, since henceforth, whatever progress he made will positively impact my legion's morale here in the Riverlands and improve his chances of gaining support to his father as the next Lord of the Twins. I also asked Jenna's son to seek to gain the support of both House Bracken and Blackwood, since their feud was put to a momentary hold due to the weirwood tree from Raventry Hall being mysteriously restored to full health. Meanwhile, I left the twins set on persuading Lord Mallister to help nourish my legionnaires and marines' foothold on the Riverlands, helping fund the efforts to renovate the water tower to match the other two twin towers. Having said that, I kept in mind that we would do well to not openly defy the Tullys' authority over their kingdom yet, which meant their role as keepers of peace and order was paramount in maintaining the appearances. At least until my Royal Legion was allowed to gain sufficient accomplishments in the approaching war with the Ironborn. After that, I could have Hoster Tully himself actively trying to undermine my influence in his kingdom that it would only serve to show to the small folk how petty the Tullys really were. With time, it was inevitable that people would start to notice how influential my Royal Legion was really becoming. Luckily for now, most lords still believed that their countrymen would remain loyal to them in the case a civil war ever came to pass. However, as the years will come by with my legionnaires helping to feed and protect the people from harsh winters and invading armies, such notions of patriotism should be shifted to the sentiment of embracing the realm as a whole. In any case, instead of treating my 7th name day as a minor inconvenience to my plans, I had decided to make it into an opportunity. While also not forgetting that I was on a tight schedule in regards to reaching and influencing some people on the Iron Islands before winter came and the window of opportunity was lost forever, as I'm sure Balon Greyjoy must be really impatient to declare their independence this late in comparison to the canonical timeline. So I allowed myself to spend a few days throwing a big party and publicly celebrating my birthday on my next stop at Seaguard. For that purpose I've sent Light, my white raven, beforehand to Geryon, who has separated from my group since we made our way further inland from the arbor, requesting that he brought along everything a royal festivity would require on his ship, the Laughing Lion, and others of my legion's marine fleet. Not forgetting Geryon's brothers and sister, or Davin's family, since they were all too important for me not to invite them to celebrate my birthday. Especially Tywin, who for all effects and purposes was supposedly shaping me to become like him, but only the two of us knew he was in no position to tell me what to do or not. The people were hungry for more than just food, they craved distraction, so I opted for killing two birds with one stone. Fortunately, being the son of Robert Baratheon came with the peculiar perk of people never batting an eye if I ever requested that an extravagant tourney and a festival be organized in my name. Lord Jason Mallister certainly wouldn't mind since I revealed that I would afford all the major expenses with my own money, with the added incentive that the influx of people would help his house fill their coffers a little before the next winter. Sadly, in terms of excitement it wouldn't compare with my 6th name day at King's Landing, where I won both the archery and melee contest while also getting intimate with a Dornish princess. The closest thing I had was exchanging some words with Davin's sisters, Serena and Marielle, who became a little too insistent on spending time with me. And perhaps a little bit with Jenna Lannister, who with all due respect to both Tywin and Cleos was growing into a fine gilf. Even if you could describe her as a little chubby, honestly that just increased her appeal for now. But I digress. Speaking of Arianne Nymeros Martell, I wonder how she was doing. Laying with as many men and women as she could. Most likely. Already beginning to suspect her father planned to deny her birthright. Not a clue. Perhaps she's still surprised that I was actually capable of performing real magic. Regardless, our paths were bound to cross again in the future, for everyone knew that a Dornish rebellion was always a looming threat just waiting to happen. And that was common knowledge even back when the Targaryens were in charge and still riding their dragons. Rhaenys' survival back at the end of my father's rebellion might have bought us some time though. Opportunely, Tyrion and Geryon were very creative with ways of enticing the masses, while the remaining Lannisters knew exactly how to make a profit from it, so I wasn't all that bothered with those types of matters like spreading the word or hiring people. I was really considering having my alias as Esser Knight step in and bring more credit to all the rumors I've been building for myself, like being half giant or blessed by the warrior himself, but ultimately decided against it in order to favor my close companions and display them as fine examples of what my royal legion was growing into. Though I couldn't resist making another appearance as Bard and doing another one of my performances in the festival's feast. And something told me that I needed to make a private reunion as rogue so to ease Satin's expectations upon him. As for the tourney in itself, Tyrion, who I've tasked to keep training both Satin and Samwell's aim and exercising their fitness in my absence, competed in the archery contest and won using the special-made crossbow I made for him. A pity there wasn't anything like an acrobatic or riding dispute added to the marksmanship trial, since having him almost bullseye all of the targets wasn't giving him the proper challenge he needed. To his credit, the small Lannister certainly felt more comfortable amongst actual fighters now, probably due to him knowing that he could actually take most of them in a duel, if not more by fighting dirty. I just knew Uncle Jaime would definitely have a hard time believing the rumors beginning to spread after his little brother's victory. Even the mighty Tywin Lannister had to admit it was a better image for his house to spread that even their lowliest member was still visibly better than the common rabble. That and his stupid look of surprise when he finally realized Tyrion wasn't a stunted fool. And since Davin wasn't a knight yet, I've allowed him to compete in the melee dispute and display for all to see the skill and charisma of my first champion fighter. He certainly had a certain inspiring presence in the way he fought, surpassing any other fighter that dared face him. His skill with the sword and shield were also very impressive, in particular how he easily managed to bash helmets off and disarm his opponents with his shield while landing critical strikes and precise parryings with his arming sword. I managed to hear his sisters and parents cheering for him and constantly shouting words of encouragement, as any doting family ought to. The heir of Lannisport, now more popularly known as the Sea Lion of Lannisport, was definitely earning glory and fame to his name, which made him even more useful to me, since many influential houses would be interested in settling a marriage with a great catch like him. As soon as I had him anointed as a knight that fought in an actual war, I will have Kevin's firstborn, Lancel, become his page and eventually squire, instead of humiliating the poor lad with serving my father. As for Sandor, my sworn shield, paladin for vengeance and cleric of the Twilight, he completely wiped the floor with all the knights he faced in the joust. Currently, we both knew that if he and his brother ever came to trade blows, the Hound would be victorious over the Mountain in most of their encounters. And I could see the thankfulness in his voice for that, given he took my suggestion of keeping his healed face a secret for now. Besides, I also have a lot to gain if my sworn shield suddenly became the very best knight Westeros had to offer. And the Hound was just barely 20 years old, who knows how far he will progress by the time he reaches Barristan age. I've yet to reveal to them that they could survive most fatal wounds, at least if their health bars weren't completely emptied during combat, just because I believed it would embed bad habits of being careless into them. But I digress. The festivities were really a breath of fresh air to the legionnaires who had marched and served me for almost a year now, providing excellent encouragement for more people to seek out enlisting in my Royal Legion while also displaying that our high standards weren't merely the whims of a young prince. And as with all the good things, my 7th name day party had come to an end by the 3rd day of my stay at Seaguard, with the morale of my men rising as high as it could have been for now. Fortunately, by then Lord Mallister had already agreed to send several of his best workers to aid the renovation and improvement of the water tower at the Twins. As the folk of Seaguard were still recovering from the fighting, eating, drinking and singing, I was finally allowed some alone time with my inner circle of companions around a cozy hearth, saying our goodbyes before I sailed with Sandor and Garyon towards the Iron Islands. I must tell you, dear nephew, your name days parties are always the best. Tyrion told me before trying the flute I've gifted him. The only bad part though is finding an appropriate gift to present you with. Instead, you are always the one handing out peculiar presents. I think of it more as an investment. I smiled at his confused look. If you learn how to play it well, I will be graced with good music alongside good fellowship. Ah, that is what we are, isn't it? Tyrion smiled, recalling my tales. Absolutely, we are bound as the champions of the 7. I nodded affirmatively, knowing that we weren't being eavesdropped by anyone else, thanks to Shadow finally doing her job accordingly. Though I will also have to hand out a few tasks for you two to complete for me. You speak as if we will be separating, my prince, questioned Davin while sharpening one of his arrows with a grindstone. Only momentarily, I suddenly informed my 3 companions. At least until I return from my journey to the Iron Islands. But Davin subtly stored the arrow away in his inferior inventory and turned to face me. Is that really prudent given what you've told us in regards to their future rebellion? Raising an eyebrow, I stared at him for a brief moment and he quickly expressed regret. Forgive me for doubting your judgment, my prince. It wasn't my intention to offend you in any way. Davin apologized with a bow. You haven't offended me in any way, Davin. Raising a hand, I put him at ease. So, what will you have us do while you and Clegane are away? Tyrion questioned while Sandor, who had his burned face back only thanks to my minor illusion, took a large bite off the chicken pie I've cooked for him. I need you to gain the support of the Westerland houses to subsidize our headquarters at Lannisport. Seek out a list of relevant individuals like Forley Prester, Adam Marbrand, Lyle Crakehall and Harwin Plum. With sufficient persuasion, I believe they can be a great addition to my legion. I told Tyrion while activating my bardic inspiration. Also, sent orders to Lord Lefford for locating and building outposts in a narrow goat path that compromises the Westerland's border defenses, request for Lord Farman to send a few of his ships to patrol our shores during the winter, for Lord Brax to provide us with some good horses and knights, for Lord Sarsfield to send us some of his best archers that can be put to good use, and Lord Kenning to send immediate report if any Ironborn longship is sighted. It won't be easy, but I will manage. Tyrion reassured me, his expression showing how serious he was about all of this. I believe you will also be leaving both Pia, Satin and the Tarly boy. Don't worry, I will have them secure at Castle Rock. Though I'm not sure the lass will appreciate being separated from you. She will have to learn to grow less dependent on me. Besides, she also needs to practice the medical skills I've been teaching to her. As for the rest, I'll leave it to you, uncle. I turned to face Davin. As for you, I need you to inform Tyga to call back all of my legionnaires patrolling the Westerlands, so we can maintain our forces ready during the winter in case the Ironborn got stupid enough to rebel this early. Take all the provisions and capable men my uncle will be acquiring for us and start integrating it to reinforce Lannisport. Remember, my visions told me that they will first strike by setting my grandfather's fleet aflame during the night, so stay vigilant if anything diverges from that. Understood. Davin nodded. I've been looking forward to bringing a few changes to my family's city. So, Sandor finally joined our conversation. Will it be just the two of us sailing around those iron cunts' territory? Actually, I've called a few friends to join us. I told him, hearing Shadow's voice in my head informing me that the group I've called for was just in time. Friends? Who? Sandor asked, confused. Greetings, my friends, it's so good to see you're all safe and sound. Especially you, my prince. Spoke Syrio Farrell, still beaming with the same confidence he had when we met years ago, followed by his noticeable proud Bravo C accent. Syrio, it's so good to see you too. I replied to his greetings, ignoring Sandor's grumpy face while Tyrion and Davin followed my example. Ha, so we join again, after another one of your big and extravagant name day parties, my prince. Thoros loudly barged in with a beer jug in hand. I've got some wild tales to share with you all. While Tyrion and Davin greeted them all back, I noticed Clegane rolling his eyes and resuming to eat his meal. What an antisocial moron. Following the two SOC men were Lothor Brune and Jalabar Ko, displaying a few new scars over their bodies, but still looking healthy and confident enough. Salutations to all of you, spoke the Summer Islander, now looking much like a skilled warrior, with a proper armor and weapon with him, than an exiled prince that knew nothing but to beg for my father's help in recovering his title. It's been a busy year, I'm pleased we all survived. The Crownlander freerider also joined in, speaking more openly than I was used to hearing from him. Likewise, I replied back to all of them. We were talking about our plans for the future. Join us. The 1st of March 2022. The 1st of May 2022. The 2nd of February 2022. The 18th of August 2022. Hope this chapter is of your liking. Anything you wish to ask or suggest, feel free to do so. Check out my auxiliary chapter if you still haven't. Thanks as always for your attention and please be safe. Any problems with my writing, just point them out and I will correct them as soon as possible. About the MC's wild shape perk, I haven't forgotten about it. Cold sweat smile. It's just that the opportunity to explore it more in depth hasn't presented itself yet. Here are some examples of what he has already unlocked. Known wild shape forms: ant, baboon, badger, cat, deer, frog, goat, hyena, jackal, lizard, rat, squirrel, otter, little valerian, scorpion, spider, weasel, sheep, camel, mastiff, mule, poisonous snake, serpent, pony, turtle, fox, beaver, boar, constrictor snake, cow, draft horse, elk, zorses, unicorn, stag, porcupine, shadowcat, panther, leopard, riding horse, steed, hound, wolf, ape, black bear, crocodile, warhorse, brown bear, dire wolf, auroch, giant spider, giant toad, lion, tiger. Recently, the MC unlock forms that can breathe underwater and a few giant variations such as fish, crab, salamander, octopus, seahorse, quipper, giant crab, reef shark, dolphin, giant frog, giant octopus. Please don't mind the occasional redundancy with names like stag and elk. And I'm open to adding new species to this list if they don't strand too far away from the examples already there. But the current limit to his feature is that flying creatures of any kind are still not available. On top of that, there are still some I felt were a little too big or foreign to be of any practical use other than having a larger list of transformations. 1. Bee, butterfly, seahorse. 2. Dove, swallow, raven, crow, goose, duck, rooster, crane, owl, bat. 3. Falcon, vulture, swan, hawk, eagle. 5 to 8. Reef shark, harakar, frost spider, elephant, walking lizard, lizard lion, basilisk, griffin. I really recommend that you check out 10 Years of Westeros Craft, a showcase. It has helped me better picture the world George R.R. Martin has created. Cool thumbs up. Sorry for the delay. Cold sweat smile. I'm currently visiting some relatives on the USA United States Snowflake Snowman. I first released this chapter around January and February of 2022. Creation is hard. Cheer me up. Vote for me. I tagged this book. Come and support me with a thumbs up. Like it. Add to library. Have some idea about my story. Comment it and let me know. Daichi_TBR 193 Creators Thoughts.